OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Well. We've got a very busy programme for you. Lots of debates to get our teeth stuck into this morning. It's 7:30 this Thursday morning. Wherever you are in the world, you're very welcome along. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We're particularly interested in your views on the Republic of Ireland situation. We're playing again this weekend. I think everybody agrees at this point it's reaching the point of must win. Even though we're already out of the campaign, it's a must win game in what's essentially a dead rubber. It's an interesting scenario we find ourselves in at this point in our evolution. Get in touch, 087 9 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. There's loads more we're doing on the show today. We've got Derval O'Rourke. She's going to join us around about 9:10 to talk to us about the merits of eggs. We were just having a little debate there about power ranking your eggs.
Yeah, you really kind of tore the top of the can of this collection of worms off in our pre-show discussion, because for me...
Bit partridge, well, go on.
Give me a break, 7:31. The Mount Rushmore is decided. The Mount Rushmore is decided, and there are little variations
in
the Mount Rushmore. There are fried, poached, scrambled. What's the other one? What's the other?
It's boiled. It's
boiled. That's the Mount Rushmore. The Mount Rushmore picks itself. Unless you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger and have like raw eggs up there, but even he, I suspect, would prefer his eggs cooked. And then you brought other things to the table.
What about frittatas? Are you talking omelets? All these things are like fast food. Eggs are fast food. They're the greatest thing that ever was invented. Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, you're vegan, in which case I'm sorry for your troubles. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of jealous, don't worry. Okay, quick, give us yours. Power rank them quickly. Don't think about it, because if you think about it too long,
Scrambled 1, fried 2, poached 3, boiled 4. And I think that's pretty clear, and I wouldn't be up for moving on any of that, to be honest with you.
Boiled eggs becomes egg mayonnaise and becomes like Caesar salad and becomes all that stuff. So they're not getting bonus points for flexibility. You're like,
you're like for the future.
You're simply like Gulliver's Travel. Do you open the big end or the little end first? That's the only thing you're interested in.
Yes, I'm not interested in the future. I'm here for the here and now. What can I do with kitchen utensils and an egg? Not some sort of egg mayonnaise processing plant or whatever it requires.
Okay. I think that it depends. On a Saturday or Sunday morning after you've had a few drinks, the only thing you want is a fried egg. Right?
Yes.
At that point, scrambled is like far too much hassle, far too healthy. You want the fat dripping off the eggs onto your bread, and you're like, please God.
You're just doing your scrambled eggs wrong. There is a hangover version of a scrambled egg that you could do, which is far less healthy for you, which just involves cooking it in a massive pan of butter, which has a very similar impact on your future prospects of living to your 60s.
Even as a hangover food, scrambled egg beats fried eggs.
It would come close. I see your point. I mean,
there are times when nothing but a fried egg is going to scratch that itch.
100%. It's better than a lot of other things. Certainly wouldn't be venturing towards boiled on a Saturday morning. But I think that you can actually... The versatility of the scrambled egg, basically, is my point. That no matter what day of the week it is, no matter what time of the day it is, scrambled egg is your only friend at that point. And it can do anything for you. It's a loyal companion, the scrambled egg. And that's why it's number one.
Okay, well, we're going to ask Derval O'Rourke to power rank her favourite eggs a little bit later on as well. If you've got an opinion on that, we'd like to hear from it this morning. There's some other very quick things I just want to... we don't already do top of the morning to you at this time, but vaccination once again. FAI facing fan fury over jabs is the headline on the back page of the match preview, and it looks like Callum Robinson is going to start this weekend, which I think you would expect if at this stage... I think this thing blows itself out over the next 24 hours and we start talking about football again, do we? Is that what happens?
Yeah, I think so. It'll pop its head up frequently over the next little while for sure, but I think we also need to remember that we've been frustrated by Callum Robinson's absences over the last year or so under Stephen Kenny as well, and whenever it comes to the aftermath of those matches, we're like, if Callum Robinson was playing, that attack would have been a little bit more potent. So Callum Robinson in the starting team, I would be astonished if he was left out for this. Okay,
the other big news coming through overnight is that Mike Ashley might be finally on the verge of selling his club to a Saudi Arabian conglomerate. This would be the latest Gulf state getting involved in the Premier League. It was initially mooted, I think, it's hard to remember, in the middle of COVID at some point in that vast indeterminate period between March 2020 and May 2021. None of which I have any recollection of beyond kind of it was a long period of time and everything was a bit grim. In the middle of that, he tried to sell his club to a member of the Saudi Arabian royal family. I don't want to incorrectly...
Yeah. Well, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, which happens to be overseen by Mohammed bin Salman. Of course, totally different organisations to the actual family. He just oversees the operation.
And that'll be very important when it comes to, the sponsorship deals that they do with other businesses from Saudi Arabia, which allow them to circumvent some of the rules on financial fair play. So just bear that in mind into the future if this takeover does happen. The takeover was initially torpedoed amidst some public disquiet about the involvement of the Saudi Arabian ruling family in the Premier League, not on the basis of any human rights issues. Obviously, there are ongoing massive issues with Saudi Arabia and what they're doing in Yemen, and just generally the rights of women in that country. That wasn't really anything to do with the problems that the Premier League had with what was going on and the other Premier League owners had with the Saudi Arabian royal family getting involved. It was to do with piracy of football signals. So essentially, they sell the rights to a broadcaster, and then, sometimes other people watch those games, but not on the original broadcaster. They might just search on Twitter and find the ability to watch it for free. And a lot of the piracy, it seems, was coming from companies connected to or involved with or based in Saudi or in companies that had Saudi Arabian operations. And that was the issue.
That seems to be the real part that's moved over the last little while for sure. I mean, the blockade seems to have softened quite a bit since the start of this year. I know Philippe Auclair was on with us last week pointing to that and the implications that the blockade softening are actually going to have on football on a whole range of different levels, including the World Cup next year. But in the context of Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia and their takeover of Newcastle United, it seems that basically beIN being available in Saudi Arabia now is the key part, which I know we all know that TV rights are important, but it seems to have been paramount to pretty much everything else in this conversation here, where it seemed ridiculous at the time that a Saudi Arabian fund could take over a football club in the Premier League and then people in their country would not be able to legally watch the Premier League club that they had taken over. So they needed to get around that. They needed to get beIN back on Saudi Arabian television screens in a legal way. And the ending of that blockade, I guess, went towards helping that and towards beIN becoming available once again in Newcastle or in Saudi Arabia rather, and then the Public Investment Fund can come along and actually can actually invest in Newcastle United. You talk about the fact that a state-sponsored program shouldn't be allowed to take over a club. I mean, it's literally against the rules, and Saudi Arabia will say that they're not involved with this whatsoever. It's a totally separate fund. But MBS has been involved in this on a number of different occasions, not least last year when Boris Johnson was under pressure from him to reverse his decision for the sake of British Saudi Arabian diplomacy. It seems to me that is certainly a little bit of state interference going on from their perspective, but I suspect that those sort of things will be turned a blind eye to. But television rights, God no, that's way too important to turn a blind eye to.
I'd like to talk to somebody with a deep understanding of the geopolitics of the Gulf region to see exactly what's going on here, because how did the row in the first place happen? Why did it happen? What is the relationship between the owners of beIN and the owners of the satellite network that was stealing the signal in Saudi Arabia, and why all of a sudden has peace broken out there? So look, that's one aspect to it. The other aspect to it is the Newcastle fans are happy that somebody's coming in and spending money, and look, who knows whether or not they're actually going to invest any money. Reports are mixed about what the level of investment will be. It will be more than Mike Ashley. I think it's fair to say that there will be some money, and we'll see exactly what happens with regards to that.
It's a different time though, isn't it, to say the Manchester City takeover. I mean, financial fair play is more of a thing now. I'm not saying it's going to stop Newcastle United from spending lavishly over the next couple of years, but I don't think it'll be as immediate as Manchester City or as flagrant as Manchester City. Maybe that's just a very innocent expectation of what's actually going to happen over the next little while.
Who knows? Maybe all it means for the short term is that they actually get to keep their best players by paying them salaries that they would be able to get elsewhere, and that would immediately mean that Alison Maximin says, and all of a sudden Newcastle becomes a destination club for middle tier footballers who want to eventually prove their worth in the Premier League and then get a move to a Champions League side. I don't know, but it's interesting that the fans in Newcastle have decided that they've had enough of Mike Ashley and they're going to take this, whatever it comes with and whatever strings are attached, and they're going to hold their nose metaphorically until the money gets spent. And that's why sports washing works. That's exactly why sports washing works. It's because we all get sucked in watching Messi and Mbappe and the soap opera that happens there. And it's the same at Manchester United. Like, Manchester United is a means of using massive amounts of debt, heaping massive amounts of debt on the shoulders of the fans of that club to take ownership of that club, and we don't care about it. It's not like the point of sports washing is to gain soft power in international terms for those countries. That's why they do it. But like, let's not forget that there's a whole system based on the way that the shares of Manchester United are floated. They're just sold.
Yeah, just literally on the same page here in the Times. It's actually very interesting juxtaposition. Glazer pair set to stand to net £137 million from share sales. So this is Paul Hurst reporting that they're putting up £137 million of shares. So 9.5 million Manchester United shares are up for sale. It's going to go into the pockets of Kevin and Edward Glazer, and the prospectus makes clear that none of the money will go back into the club. We will not receive any proceeds from the sale of any Class A ordinary shares by the selling shareholders. So
the share price has gone up significantly since the arrival of Cristiano Ronaldo as well. I think the value of the shares has gone up by about 20 million since his arrival. So already the money that somebody spent is being taken out somewhere else from the club. So look,
if you're a football fan, which owner do you want? Like, I mean, if you're that dyed in the wool as a Newcastle fan or a Manchester United fan, like, you don't hear Manchester City fans complaining about their owners. You don't hear Paris Saint-Germain fans complaining about their owners. Manchester United fans, though, I think there's obviously a whole different element at play when it comes to comparing these ownerships. But certainly when you look at the way the Glazers have used it as an ATM.
Yeah, and so I'm not trying to make some moral equivalence between these things, because they're all of a different magnitude and a different scale. But it's just like everybody's playing a game, and football is the plaything of these states and these families. And I don't know, forget it, don't forget it, up to you. You pays your money, it takes your choice. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number while you sit on your couch eating your eggs. 7:42 this morning. Let's talk about the other thing that's happening at the moment. It's interesting, particularly interesting to us on this show, that with a few notable exceptions, there is not much conversation happening around the imminent Special Congress, which is now 12 days away. No, hang on, my maths aren't good. It's 15 days away. 15 days until the GA decides whether or not it's going to go for Plan A, Plan B, or the status quo, right? Plan A, we know, is reconstituting the 4 provinces into 4/8. Nobody seems to want it. It looks like it's going to have no support at Congress, or certainly not enough support at Congress. Plan B is gathering support. Yeah. We're aware that Plan B is gathering support. I'm going to get into that in 1 second now. Status quo, you would say, is the outright favourite at the moment. I would say it's a 6-1, 7-1 on favourite. So it's going to take a bit of a miracle to get Plan B through. But it's our view that Plan B would absolutely revolutionise Gaelic football across the country. It would lay bare the difficulties that the smaller counties have, and at least allow for a building of some plans around getting your best players playing football the whole year long. It's not perfect. It is absolutely not perfect. Nobody says these are the tablets from Mount Sinai and these are the 10 Commandments and you should never go from straying from these because it's absolutely perfection. We've reached human perfection. Nobody's saying that. But the status quo is a series of absolute mullerings in every province, with the exception of Ulster. And even in Ulster, there have been blowouts. Down got blown out in the championship last year in a one-off game. We're in danger of mythologising the Ulster Football Championship a little bit here. The rest of the football championships, they all have built in, codified into their very existence, absolute hammerings. And what we're voting for, and what we think is happening, is that is what's being told. You've got to keep going. And as Tony McEntee said, people are saying to him when he goes, "Oh, come and play football for Sligo." Why, Tony? Why? Why would I play football? To go out and get absolutely humiliated in front of my friends and family and potentially on TV by Mayo, who have like 10 years of strength and conditioning from the time they're under 16 to the time that they finally make their debut at 26, whereas we've got a scratch team who've come together and who are doing their very best and who are competitive in their league division, but who are getting absolutely humiliated. And then perhaps there's a back door, but maybe there isn't. There might be no back door in the status quo, because we don't know. Do we go back to 2017? I mean, all this will become clear in the next few weeks, and maybe we do. Maybe they do get into a back door, and they get a game, so that they can have another game and then get hammered by another good team who are using them as cannon fodder to prepare for an All-Ireland quarter-final. So the option is fix it or don't fix it. And at the moment, there is definitely growing support for fix it.
I think so. It is interesting where we're at in this conversation, because maybe there's a resignation at the moment that the status quo will actually prevail, despite, as you mentioned there, the growing support for Proposal B privately across the country. And I just wonder if it's divorced from the idea that Croke Park haven't really supported anything here. It kind of felt like in the build-up to the Congress where Super 8s was going to be on the table, it felt like it was wall-to-wall coverage. It felt like there was real momentum behind something that was going to pass. Whereas it feels that the coverage is almost reflecting the mood in Croke Park now, which is that this thing is not going to pass. And that is kind of a little bit disappointing at this point, almost as if that if there's no sources coming out of Croke Park, then the whole thing can't be covered properly at the moment. So we've been in touch with people over the last little while. We've been in touch with a couple of county boards. The main takeaway is that they can't fully commit one way or the other just yet. A lot of county chairpersons are in favour of this, but they can't commit just yet to going on the record, because a lot of them are actually just meeting next week. Now, in fairness, maybe the coverage reflects that next week, and once these county board meetings on the topic of Special Congress happen...
Why is there no coverage now, though?
You would have thought that could have been the way, because it does feel it will all be reactive next week. Decisions will have been made in county boards, and then as a result of that, it'll be hard to kind of change minds. But there have been... Do you remember
Rule 42, right? Do you remember the build-up to Rule 42 and the debate about that? The debate raged on talk shows the whole time. It was a culturally significant moment, but this is actually, because it feels to me anyway that this is far more important for the sport of Gaelic football. That actually what's going to happen here is a transformation in our summers, our sporting summers. You will be able to go and support your team in big games right around the country. There'll be an opportunity for you to go and plan your holidays around away matches. There's going to be better season ticket sales. I don't know. Am I mad about this?
No, I don't think so. Maybe some people do think you're mad about this. I'm not sure. I'm kind of with you I'm with you full stop on. I think of the three options, Proposal B, I think, is what I want to see for the championship. And even if it is on a trial format for 2-3 years, I just want to kind of bring to people a sense of what we're getting from county board. So we've been in touch with every county board, and as I say, the vast majority are still sitting on the fence for now until next week. But a couple of people have said that they're happy to go on the record about this, even though they're waiting for their meeting next week. And one of those county boards is Sligo. And I was speaking to Sean Carroll, the Sligo County Board chairman, yesterday. We might get him on the show over the next couple of weeks before it actually goes to the Clár. And just read out the statement that he sent me yesterday, because it's really interesting. He said, Sligo are going to make their decision formally on how we will vote on motions before Special Congress at a management committee meeting next week. Regarding the proposals for the potential reform of the football championships, I believe that we will decide to support Proposal B based on discussions we've had previously, and that's the position I'll be advocating for, the reasons set out below. So he's speaking in his own capacity. He's not speaking for his entire county board. Firstly, I want to state that as a county, we will always value our provincial championships and strive to compete and win these competitions. Our last senior success in 2007 was a tremendous boost to the county, and we want to compete at that level again within our province, as we do at under 17 and under 20s level. Under Proposal B, the round robin system will allow counties that lose a game to still be in contention and have a chance to learn lessons and apply the fixes in the short term. Concerns about potential waning interest / attendances can and should be addressed by additional marketing / promotion and investment support from Croke Park. Our provincial councils are vital to counties, and much more that organisations who run competitions, so many their programmes and supports must be guaranteed to be funded. I think taking this concern off the table will be vitally important in making this decision, and would urge Croke Park for clarity on this. And that's an interesting point. That, I mean, we had Brian McAvoy on the show the other day who referred to it as turkeys voting for Christmas, and I'm not sure that is the black and white provincial council view on this. I think that they're as we hear from the Sligo County Board this morning, there is a sense that actually their experience within the province would be enhanced from this new format, and I would agree with that. Now, he said, will I go through the rest of the statement or yeah, I'll go through the rest of this. So he said, I've spent a considerable portion of my time as a GAA administrator working on CCC and studying fixtures and the work they put in. The split season proposal, which was passed at Congress in spring, is revolutionary but necessary, and in my opinion, the only hope of having a manageable fixtures calendar. This was seen as a step too far when the report was issued, but the intervention of COVID meant it got trialled and was immediately heralded a success, which again probably points to the fact that trialling something is not a bad idea. He says, a decision of similar gravity is now before us regarding football championship structures. It's widely accepted that the league is our best competition. The radio coverage on the final day of the league as results pour in is one of the best days of the year. Moving the competition to centre stage at a more favourable time of the year will only enhance the excitement. He talks about the additional promotion opportunities and the promise of 7 championship games against teams of a similar standard. He says, my feeling is that a return to the status quo will be disastrous for counties like Sligo, as an experience of our recent years underline. Proposal A has few more guaranteed games, but would also be a missed opportunity if adopted. Proposal B might not be perfect, but with the appropriate supports mentioned above and potential innovations in the future, represents the best option and levels the playing field in some ways. This is a tremendous opportunity to improve our football championships, and one I hope won't be missed. So I know that was lengthy, but it's a really interesting insight into what a chairperson is thinking at the moment, even before that they have their meeting next week. And I suspect there are a lot of people in power in county boards across the country who are thinking exactly like Sean Carroll is. They're just waiting until the meeting happens next week to gauge club opinion, for example.
Yeah, so our understanding is that many of the counties who are having debates about this are coming to that same conclusion. We know that there is today a briefing from the Gaelic Players Association where they have already said that the majority of players are actually actively in favour of option B, and that they're going to ask their players to lobby their county boards to vote in favour of this. So what we've seen is that the provincial councils are against it. I'm very curious about why this isn't a debate in the press, why the GAA correspondents aren't asking what the story is with this, or why they haven't published what they think is happening in the background. Because I've no doubt with all of this, we can't see what the conversations that are happening between Croke Park and the provincial councils and the county boards. Although we got a sense of it from Brian McAvoy, and in fairness to Brian McAvoy, he came out and spoke to us. Very few other people are willing to go on the record from the hierarchy of the various provinces and beyond to say this is what's happening, this is what we think should happen, these are the pitfalls from A, B and status quo, and this is the financial implications of it. So unless deals are being done in the background, we won't know what happens until the actual vote is coming out in Congress, unless they come out and tell us we're strongly in favour of a trial period for B, or we're strongly in favour of a trial period for A, we're strongly in favour of a trial period for C, which is status quo, which is not really a trial period. So you know what I mean.
Well, like one of the elements in all of this as well is that Congress is a bit different this year as well. It's not this massive sprawling event that we've become used to over the last little while. It is scaled back due to COVID, because I think they are looking to do it in person. So I was speaking to somebody in one of the counties yesterday who said that they will have 5 delegates representing their county, a county of significant size, and previously they would have had maybe 10 to 12 delegates, if I'm not mistaken. So there is a scaling down. It also means that if there is a mandate coming from the county board, it will be easier to carry that out. So I'm not saying this is any more democratic or not. Maybe it's less so, but it's also more controlled. And if there is representations made to the county board, either from the players or from other officials, they'll probably be heard and they'll probably be represented on the ballot on the day, considering there are fewer delegates from your county actually showing up to the thing. Less chance of renegades or other vested interests, basically.
I wonder, is there any merit in having league finals in divisions 2, 3 and 4? Is there any point in that? Is there something that you could give the winners of that so there's like a super wildcard weekend where the winners of those games are all guaranteed? So the winner of Division 2 is guaranteed a home game against a team from Division 1. The winner of Division 3 is guaranteed, what do you do? Division 4, the winner is guaranteed to go through to the All-Ireland last 16. So you finish top of the group, but you need to win your final. That there's an extra week of jeopardy. Now that's adding extra weeks, and I think one of the points about this is that you can have a condensed orgy of Gaelic football that like leaves the whole country gasping for more, and then you're finished.
Like the league finals thing was an interesting point raised by Brian the other day, because the further down the divisions you go, it seems that the more it matters. The Derry Offaly match earlier on this year, for example, seems to matter a hell of a lot. In an ideal world, the Tailteann Cup would mean something, and that is your version of the lower tier league final, and the top of the tree actually just getting promotion is obviously a big thing. So it's a hard one to know. Like I do think in the top tiers, like we know that in recent years it doesn't matter anymore. Like we saw David Clifford in 2020 barely crack a smile when they won Division 1. So it doesn't matter to them. It is when you get down to Division 3 and 4. How do you replicate that big day out, the sort of meaningful moment of silverware? Hopefully the Tailteann Cup is the proper substitution for that.
It's hard to see that happening, isn't it? Look, I don't know.
More so than a league final. Like it's not that hard to usurp the prestige of a league final. Of course, it's going to be hard to usurp the feeling of All Ireland final day and Sam Maguire and the traditional championship. I accept that, but the league final isn't. Yes, it's been around for a hell of a long time.
Have the Division 3 and 4 league finals? That's a relatively new thing, isn't it?
I'm not sure, but like there is a level of tradition there. But I think it can be. I think it could be scratched away at with something better that's new. I accept, though, obviously, that when it comes to the provincial finals and the All Ireland final, of course, those are like magical days in the calendar. I don't think the league finals hold that level of. They don't hold that place in the heart of the Irish people. So I think that is a sacrifice that I suspect a lot of people will be willing to make, especially when you do have a second tier competition. Now, that is the big question for me, is how do you make that second tier competition work? It's not about how you preserve the provincial championships and all that. I actually think the provincial championships could be fine. I think people might be surprised by how things turn out with that being put to the front of the year and in a round robin format. My big concern is with the second tier competition. But regardless of what way you look at it, that's going to become a reality over the next couple of years. Like the status quo might involve the Tailteann Cup. So voting against Proposal B is not a vote against the Tailteann Cup. That's one thing we need to remember, and that for me is the biggest concern for the future of Gaelic games or for Gaelic football is how that second tier competition is actually run and how does it gain its prestige. But we got to remember that is not Proposal B. That is not what Proposal B comes with. That was going to happen in 2020 before COVID hit.
It would have been beneficial, I think, for everybody to see how or otherwise the Tailteann Cup was functioning as something that those lower tier counties, by definition, that's why they're in the Tailteann Cup, if they embraced it. And so a couple of the things that we're trying to fix here is that the best players in the smaller counties don't want to play for their county team because there's no point. I don't know if the status quo fixes that, because that's the issue that we're trying to fix, right? That's not going to in any way be sorted by this. I do think that like down the road we might decide that it's better to have the club season first and the inter-county season second, so that every club player can dream that year of having a great season, finding their form, making the county team. You know.
I think that was pretty cool last year actually when that worked out.
It seems like a little bit cart before the horse in the season. It was I had a conversation yesterday with Paul Rouse, and he was making the point that he thinks that the club season should come first because players might not, the players leaving for the summer will be less of an issue then. The best inter-county players, if they have a reason to stick around, will stick around, whereas actually club players might head off for the summer and you might miss the first 5 or 6 months of championship, and the difference between the start of the league season and the end of the start of the championship season would be vast for the club team. So that's something that's the split season. That's unconnected to whatever the two seasons are. And another great point that he made was that you actually need to put proposals in place to upskill the counties in divisions 3 and 4. Again, I totally would agree with that. I think that's a separate point to the structures, and I don't think the structures are going to fix everything, but certainly the structures will allow you to diagnose where counties are relative to each other, having played a full season of football, the same length of season of football as everybody else, in the same weather. Like we're judging the Dublin performances in August and September, and in some cases October, versus the Meath performances in June and July. And the Dublin team have had all those extra summer training sessions to work things out, deeper skill sessions, while the Meath lads are all back at their and it's just like you completely, something which is already completely imbalanced just imbalances further. And it's the same for Mayo versus Sligo. It's the same for Tyrone and Donegal or whoever it is from Ulster Makes. And it's certainly like Kerry are training away in high summer, perfecting all of the skills, deep into strength and conditioning and tactical performances in summertime, and Clare are back playing with their clubs and having the crack, and fair enough, that's their identity, and I appreciate that. But what's going to happen the next season? Who's going to have made the most quantum leap forward?
Well, it's pretty obvious, and then McGinley made that point on the show as well. He says that the only way for these counties to make a step forward is pure consistency, whether it's gym program, strength conditioning and football. It is just that level of consistency and the time that they get in an inter-county setup, because it's going to be a hell of a lot better than people are getting at their clubs. And if you want to pursue the dreams of actually moving up the ranks, you're going to need that time. The dice is completely stacked against you when you're actually going up against these counties in the current format, and that is the biggest reason for change and the biggest opportunity here. It just would be great to think that this thing could be brought through on a trial basis. I don't think anybody's got any problems with the Super 8s being ditched. Like this notion that you trial something and then you're stuck with it for life. I think the Super 8s prove that that's not the case. I'd be surprised if we saw the Super 8s again. Maybe we see it next year and they fill out the 3 years, but beyond that, it's never going to happen again. So you can have these debates as the thing is actually.
The one thing I would say that the Super 8s did prove to us, though, that when you're stuck and you made a bad decision, fix it while it's actually happening, as opposed to no, we made the decision. Dublin are absolutely guaranteed 2 home games because Croke Park's not their home venue, and they changed it a little bit for the second season, but not enough. Like, you still had Dublin having 2 home games in the Super 8s, which led to the dead rubber situation. Like, it was a clear, maybe if Dublin had been taken out of Croke Park, there was a chance they would lose the game. But like, the home advantage is a real thing in all sports ever since the creation of somebody kicking a pig's bladder around the place. It was better to be at home kicking your own pig's bladder than somebody else's. So like, it didn't fill me with confidence that we're going to learn in the environment and we're going to make changes as it goes along.
No, and hopefully now over the next couple of days as well, we'll be able to bring you the financial reasons for all of this. They're the reasons why the power brokers should be voting for this. We understand why the players want this and the managers want this, but we need to come to an understanding about why some of the power brokers aren't in favour of this.
That's all we're asking for, because then how do you affect change if you don't know what the actual issues are? Like, the openness and transparency around this debate that we were promised hasn't quite happened yet, and I'm still, I go back to the point, I'm surprised that it hasn't been a much bigger story so far from the various media organisations out there who cover GAA all the time brilliantly. Like, you know, we're wall to wall with GAA coverage. There's just not that much happening at the moment, and this is a big moment and a big opportunity, but it's just not being covered. There are, as I said, there are a few notable exceptions who've been covering this really well from the start, but it's just, I'm surprised. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. As we said, a very busy show, so we're having our debate about the future of Gaelic football. We're going to have a debate about the future of the Republic of Ireland in just a couple of moments. Philip Quinn of the Irish Daily Mail and Gavin Cooney of the 42 are going to join us. We're bringing the sports pages this morning at 8:30. James Skehill is going to talk to us about the ongoing situation in Galway. We thought that situation would be signed, sealed and delivered from Micheál Donoghue, but he withdrew from the nomination process last week, and it now looks like Brian Hanley is the favourite to be appointed the new manager, and Derval O'Rourke is going to join us at 9:05, and we'll bring you some highlights from Wednesday Night Rugby. If you've got any thoughts, give us a text, 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Now, I want to talk to you about what's happening on the football pod with Paddy and Andy this week. Conor McKenna was on. He was their guest. Very excited. The 3 lads were very excited to have their first guest. They were positively giddy about the fact that they had Mr. Moments on this year. That's kind of what they had christened them over the first 21 episodes. So episode 22, available exclusively on the OTB Sports app every Tuesday. You can get it wherever you get your podcast by this time now, or of course you can watch it on YouTube. As I said, Conor McKenna talked about his return from the AFL, but also specifically about the level of commitment that the players are making and have making, and the changes that he's seen since coming home from a professional environment. Have a look.
As I talked about earlier on, like Gaelic football for years have been 5-6 days a week training for county. To be honest, if I ever go back to that, I don't know if I'd commit to that. I don't feel Gaelic football is not that important to me, but there's so much more stuff I want to do in my life rather than just give 6 days a week of football. I just don't agree with it. I think it's ridiculous, to be honest. I think if we prove it this year that we train 3 nights a week and we won All Ireland, and I think it's probably where the GPA can be better. I think the FLPA in Australia, they had limits on what we could do training wise. You have to be out of a club, but it's obviously different. We're professional, but at the club we can only do 2-3 full days and 2 half days. So we had to be out of a club on a half day at a certain time, so they can't keep you fractured. And I think it's somewhere where the GPA can probably say you can only train 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week max. That, like, at the end of the day, Gaelic's great, but it doesn't build your house. It doesn't pay the bills. Like, you have a life to live, so you have to put that first. And I love playing Gaelic football, but it'll never be number one, I think, in my life, to be honest.
So you mightn't have been that drunk when you tweeted any clubs in the AFL looking.
I don't know if that was me, if I was a player. I was drunk. It could have been anyone. It could have been me.
Look at this. Pass the book there. Like.
Oh, Jesus. I'd say it was me, like, but sure. That's a bit of crack.
Sure, a bit of crack is right. I think the Tyrone boys were tagging Andy Moore in a few bits as well, don't worry.
Oh, gee. I woke up the next day and my phone was bouncing. I thought there's either very good or very bad. And good laughing at it.
I think that perspective, Tommy, is often,
That's incredible. Yeah.
It's often important to kind of see it from the other side. Like hillbillies like me have been entrenched in GAA since I've been what age, and you don't see the other side of where Connor's went away there. He's seen another side to life and sport and football, and we're getting paid for doing their job and playing sport, So I think that's an amazing kind of outlook on it. I think it's very different than what we've been promoting over the last couple of weeks, Paddy,
It's just the way, I suppose, Gaelic football has been for so many years, and it's just expected of the next generation to do what the previous generation has done and devote them 5 or 6 nights a week of football. Like, even these drink ban thing, I just don't understand it. Like, in Australia, to be honest, we drank on a nearly mostly after every game or every second game. The boys got together and out, had a few pints. It was nearly not forced, but it was told go out. It was to build that camaraderie and not promotion, is that right? But it was like do that and be getting paid for it. I'm a professional sport and go out every second weekend, have a few pints with your mates. And then here it's like, there's 3 months during the summer you can't drink. It's going to affect you in 3 months. It's just stupidity. Like, and it's just that it's until that next generation changes it, which hopefully it's this generation. The next generation won't change anything. So it has to evolve at some stage. And it's just stuck in the past. I think, like, sometimes, like.
But lads, we touched on it earlier on this year. You can see it. The players are walking away, and not just from. GAA can have their head in the sand about this and just say, oh, well, he's walking away because there maybe it's a perceived weaker county and they're not going to win the All-Ireland. And I've had this conversation so much this season with two of Dublin's probably most talented players, Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion, in their prime, essentially, have said they don't want to play. Like, and people are going, that's crazy. How could they walk away from that Dublin team? And I tell you, the two lads would look at them and go, you're crazy thinking I'll go back. Because it is all encompassing. And we've touched on this, Andy, and I think that the modern younger generation of players, and like for my generation and Andy, I never seen it as a sacrifice, and we touched on that, but it was full on, but that was the price you're willing to pay to try and win the All-Ireland. I think younger players and modern players, particularly with the development of other sports, soccer, rugby, travelling, social life, COVID was like an eye-opener for a lot of inter-county players to see, well, wow, this is what a summer off is like. I can go and hang around with my mates when lockdown allowed and all like that. I don't think younger players are going to look at that and go, I'm going to play for 15 years. I don't think you're going to see those careers anymore.
Right, that was very interesting. Brilliant stuff from Conor McKenna, who revealed that his dad's a trainer and they bought a couple of horses and he's training horses, and that's essentially one of the jobs that he's working at the moment. But definitely one of those career paths that I think a lot of people would dream of having. You get the opportunity to go off and live in Melbourne and be a professional and not just make it, but make it brilliantly. Like the dummy solo that you will have seen that he threw in the middle of a game that all of Australia went wild for, that was kind of, and he talked about playing the game and taking risks. You'd be concerned if you were other counties about what evolution still has to come from that Tyrone team, assuming they all stay committed and they're not now like, we made it, that's it, my bit's done, I got my All-Ireland medal, thanks very much. I guess it could go either way.
Yeah, and even if you look at the replies to Conor McKenna's any AFL clubs need a half-back tweet, a lot of people in there saying, "Oh, this would be great if you did come back." And like, it is rare that you do have that situation where an Irish player goes down and not immediately, but gradually builds up such a respect between himself and the supporters, just as a great Australian footballer. Obviously, there was a little bit of, he had a tough time at the end with the COVID regulations situation, and you'd wonder how much that kind of soured at the end of his relationship or at the end of his time in Australia. But
no doubt, yeah.
By and large, as a footballer and as an athlete, there seems to be a lot of respect down there for him. And
that's it. Andy Moore and fishing as well away. So and you don't have to give me any details here, but did Club Tyrone help you? I'm not looking for details, but did they help you with, like, you know, was it emotional support? Was it like, did they get you a job? I don't need the details. Give me as many details as you can. A brilliant bit of interviewing from Andy Moore, and in the middle of all that, you can see he's going to make a very good inter-county manager whenever that happens for him. We wish him all the best. 10 minutes past 8, 11 minutes past 8 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Still to come. Derval O'Rourke, James Skehill talking about the situation in Galway. The Examiner are actually reporting that Micheál Donoghue isn't out of the running for that race. So we'll see what James Skehill thinks. And we're going to talk Irish football next with Philip Quinn and Gavin Cooney.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
I always knew I would set himself, I don't want to leave until I play at least one game of AFL. So I persisted the first year, playing a game. You get an incentive for playing a game, you give them actual money. So at that stage, I was like, right, I won't try this again. So when I the next year, I'll never forget it. Every time I've got selected to play a game, I'll just send my mum a wee money bag emoji and that man was playing the next game. Because in my head, I was playing a game, but to play the next game was going with more money. That's the honesty, that's what was getting me.
Talking like a true professional athlete.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Now, the debate around what's best for the future of Irish football has been raging essentially for the last 6 to 9 months, and maybe even a little bit longer before that, to tease it out a bit more ahead of our game in Baku against Azerbaijan. I'm delighted to say we've got Philip Quinn of the Irish Daily Mail and Gavin Cooney from the 42, who is actually Uncle Travelling Matt in Azerbaijan. What's it like in Baku, Gavin?
Well, I haven't seen much of it other than the inside of my own eyelid since I landed here. It took me 21 hours to get here. I left yesterday morning, so I only got into this hotel room about 3 hours ago. So I know tired and emotional is usually a euphemism when it comes to early morning sports punditry, but no, I genuinely am very tired and very emotional.
Okay, well, we wish you all the best in the next 15 minutes. If you could just stay awake for that much, that would be great. Philip Quinn, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Chair, and I have to congratulate Gavin for getting up so early. Clearly a young man with lots of energy. I'm not in Baku, but I am in somewhere beginning with B. I'm in Beaumont. I'm in my back garden.
Well, very good. For matters of the state, for matters as important as the future of the Irish football team, Philip, it's important that we get people out of their beds in Baku. So, what's your take, Philip, at the moment on where we are in the Kenny era? Baku or bust, I think, is a headline from this week. So, is it that serious? If Kenny loses in Baku, is it curtains?
I think he'd be in a very difficult position if he lost in Baku, yes. I think he needs a strong finish to the World Cup, and it needs to start on Saturday. And I'm not one of those people who would love to see us, win 3-0 and play beautiful free-flowing football. From Kenny's point of view, if he gets a 1-0 win and it's a 94th from Shane Duffy, I think he'll take it. We've actually scored a lot of late goals under Kenny. There is a lot of noise building. You can't avoid it. My take on it is that he needs a strong finish to the World Cup campaign, and by that I would think 2 wins against the weaker sides, the sides that we failed to beat at home, Azerbaijan and Luxembourg. I think Portugal will look after itself. There'll be a great atmosphere there. Everyone will want to see Ronaldo. But the FAI are getting a little bit jiggery. What's the word? Jiggy. That's the word. Jiggy. I mean, it's 16 games, 1 win, no win in 12 competitive games. Ultimately, this is a results business, and if it's not about results and results don't count, then what else does? Kenny has been given a lot of time, and the FA have been very generous up to now. But the next couple of this window and the next window are crucial. Baku or bust. If it was a 2 or 3-0 for Azerbaijan, I think he'd be in big trouble. He might be gone before the November window. I don't see that happening though. I think we'll be okay. Away from home under Kenny, we've been strong. We've taken the lead against Serbia, taken the lead against Portugal, and if we take the lead against Azerbaijan, we should be good enough to see them and beat them, and just give a little bit of momentum to the whole Kenny project, because that's what he needs right now.
Okay, Gavin, what's your assessment of where we are at the moment?
In fairness, like Philip's right. Like we do need to. I do think there needs to be at least one win on the board by the end of the campaign, just because Stephen Kenny has to make the point to the FAI board that I'm the guy to lead us through the Euro 2024 campaign and bring us to those Euros. And the best way to prove that you can win matches then is to have proved to the board that you've won at least one competitive match up to then. Like I would be broadly like, I mean, I quite like what the manager's been doing and how he's been changing how Ireland play and the young players he's infused. I think that's all necessary. It's staggering that it hasn't happened up to now. So I think all that's quite positive. There have been very mixed performances, it has to be said, across the group so far. Results obviously haven't been great at all. I don't know actually whether, what is it, 1 point in this qualification campaign, I don't know if that's really a fair reflection of how Ireland have been. I think they probably deserve a couple more points than that. But yeah, Ger, I think he needs to get a win on board before this campaign rounds out, just to mint all the progress that has been made.
How jittery are the FAI getting, Philip? Because it's well and good saying you want to get performances and results. You kind of need an alternative that makes sense out there if you're going to replace your manager, particularly one who you've brought through your own system, who you gave some time to at the under-21s, although shorter maybe than you would have liked. And then ultimately there was the cack-handed deal done by Delaney to appoint him successor, and then that situation worked itself out the way it was. So for the FAI to pull the trigger on that would kind of seem like it's another short-term fix to what ultimately feels to me like a long-term problem.
Is that for me, Jerry? Sorry, I lost the signal there. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's short-term fix, long-term problem. The question is, Kenny has been given a lot of time. I mean, it was 2018 when he knew he was getting the Irish manager's job. He was Irish manager under 21 and the senior manager elect. So he's had a lot of time. He had a long running to get ready. He had 18 months to get ready, and he's had 18 months in charge of the team. I broadly support what Gavin is saying as well. I think we do need to play a little different way. I think we've had a lot of teams that have played. Not all hoof and hope, because there was some good football played by Irish teams under previous Irish managers. But you might have asked yourself, is Kenny the best man to do this job? Could somebody else not do what he's trying to do? I feel a certain sympathy for Kenny here. At the very beginning, I think he was given too broad a reach. He was basically...
Oh, I think we still have the line with Gavin, so we might try and get Philip back on a better line. I guess the same question to you, Gavin. It's the fundamental issue, right? Stick or twist. If we twist the alternatives that are out there, I mean, obviously you would go on a proper recruitment drive.
In August of last year.
We'll just give Philip a ring back, I think, to see if we can get him on a better line.
24. How we could do well in the Euro.
We've lost your line there, Philip, properly. So we'll give you a dial back. And
okay.
They're both on the same Zoom line, it turns out, so we can't go back to Baku.
Come on, okay.
The Wi-Fi in Azerbaijan, notoriously strong, obviously, as we suffer here in Dublin. It is an interesting question. The sort of succession plan, where that to come into focus over the next little while. Who's next man up?
We don't know, right? So
out,
is it somebody from internally in the group? Is it does Jim Crawford get promoted? Is that the whole point of having under 21? Is it too early in his career? Probably is. Like there's talk of John O'Shea being a viable candidate. Like,
dare we look at the odds for the next Republic of Ireland manager again and depress ourselves again? Maybe what you're talking about there is actually a more realistic situation where things to go south over the next little while. But I do think that the list of candidates is a feather in the cap of Stephen Kenny, to be honest. I think the list of possible successors where things to go badly. Now, I mean, the lads are right. This is a vital window. These two windows are vital, and a win probably does need to be chalked up.
How much of an impact do you think the COVID issue and the fact that it's on the back pages 2 days in a row is going to have? There's criticism from Gavin Cumsky of how the FAI missed the chance to get on top of the Robinson story by maybe not putting him out there. That was definitely one option. Put out one of the players who is vaccinated, put out a safe pair of hands who's not going to answer those questions, who hasn't had COVID. Like, it was an opportunity for them to just manage that a little bit better.
Yeah, it does seem that way, and I think we can actually put that to Gavin now. He's on the line. Like, what's your take on that, Gavin? The idea of Robinson being out there in the open yesterday and being the guy to field questions and being in that position where ultimately it does pop up that he is unvaccinated.
Yeah, Robinson, a very genial character in front of the media, Owen, and he does media. He does media every time he's in the camp. So I don't know. Like, I mean, when we've asked the question of players previous to this, are you vaccinated? And they've generally said yes, or it's a private medical question, so I'm not going to answer. But Robinson went ahead and answered it, and then with FBI, what else are you meant to do? Like, Robinson's got the shovel out and started digging. Like, you can't hold him back from the edge at that point. So, it's a big story because Robinson is I'm pretty sure that Robinson is the first UK-based player to come out and say that he hasn't been vaccinated. And I think the frustration among it was the fact that he didn't fully explain why he wasn't vaccinated. He just said, well, it was my choice. And he kept saying it was my choice. And then when we made the point that, yeah, but would you accept that it's cost you caps? And he said, yeah, it's annoying that the virus can take away caps from you. And then we made the point, but had you been vaccinated, you would have been far less likely to have missed the Portugal game and have been unfit to start the 2 games that followed after it. And he just said, yeah, it's annoying that the virus can take it. So that was kind of annoying. And the way there was no explanation, the fact he didn't explain why he hadn't had it leaves us open to a lot of speculation around it, which isn't helpful for him either.
No, and look, if there was an explanation, it'd be no harm to get that out. What I'm asking, I suppose, really, is this distraction significant? It kind of feels like it didn't matter that much in the press conference to Callum Robinson. You'd hope that the debate isn't going to have an impact on his performance, and that actually he's clearly going to get picked. I mean, I think it would be remarkable if he wasn't picked in this game of all games. For various reasons, him being our best attacking player at the moment is kind of the key reason for him to be in the team. Is it going to have an impact on the team? Is it going to have an impact on preparations at all? Is it in any way an annoyance for Stephen Kenny, or do they just go, look, it's completely irrelevant, that's noise outside the camp, we've got a game this weekend? Do they somehow turn it to their advantage?
I don't know whether they can put it to their advantage. I don't know how much of a distraction it's really going to be ahead of the match, because as we're led to believe, Robinson is far from the only unvaccinated player in the Republic of Ireland camp. I'm sure he's had a couple of days of reading his name on social media attached to quite a lot of bile, really. So that's not a nice experience for him, I guess. But I can't imagine that it's too much of a distraction for this game on Saturday, because they're well used to dealing with COVID issues ahead of games and COVID stories and COVID sideshows ahead of games. So I can't imagine it's too much of a disruption for their preparations for Saturday. Although what it does kind of cast a little bit of doubt over is the fact that unvaccinated players still have to get tested 72 hours before every game, whereas vaccinated players are exempt. So, I mean, there is a chance that the unvaccinated players can still miss out on games at short notice. And I would imagine that it's a fact of great annoyance to Stephen Kenny in the wider range of things that he has players who are unvaccinated, that he has to answer these questions, and he has to that unvaccinated players are more likely to miss out big games at shorter notice than vaccinated players, which is a headache that Stephen Kenny could certainly do without.
And sometimes with false positives, as we've seen in the past. We've got Philip Quinn back now. Philip, the point about the amount of time that Kenny's had, I think most reasonable observers are aware of the fact and put a fairly sizable portion of blame on the fact that he took over the team in the midst of COVID, and as a result of that has very rarely had the full squad together. So one of the reasons why I think he should be given the Euros campaign is because I don't feel like I've seen the full effect of the Stephen Kenny imprimatur and the new coaching ticket in particular. The fact that they got a first team coach from Chelsea, I think, is a ringing endorsement of his candidacy as well. That, we don't know really what the Stephen Kenny team looks like. I don't really think that the 18 months he's been in charge is a long enough time for us to have a full, frank assessment of what Kenny is capable of.
It's a point, Jared, that you make well. I think 18 months is a long time. I think 16 games is a long time. I think a 6% win record is not good. Look, I accept there were COVID difficulties, but I don't accept that they excuse some of the performances that Ireland have put in. Also, things haven't happened on the Kenny reign that some people just tend to ignore. You mentioned Anthony Barry has come in there, and by all accounts, he is doing very well. And I think they actually have been better since he arrived in. Damien Duff walked out. Alan Kelly walked out. These were people that were part of Kenny's team. And that was never really explained. I mean, for Damien Duff to walk away. So there are things that have been happening along the lines that I don't think you can ignore. 16 matches is a long time, 12 games out of competitive win. I do give Kenny a certain amount of leeway with the COVID, and I just touched on what Gavin said there. This week hasn't been easy with the Callum Robinson distraction, and you can see Kenny is clearly awkward with it. He's a decent man. He's a strong social conscience. I admire things that he's done, like taking the knee in Hungary. I mean, that was a really powerful message that he sent out, and I think he has invested he's invested everything into making this job successful. But the FAI are a hard-nosed, commercial. They have a hard-nosed commercial side, and they have problems at the moment with people wanting to associate themselves as sponsors of the Irish football team. Sky have come on board as sponsors of the women's team. The men, no one is sponsoring the men's teams this week. We've got senior men, 21s, 17s, 19s, all playing, and we haven't got a sponsor. And that's worrying for the FAI. The attendance next at Qatar could be telling, Ger, on Tuesday, Bean counters do have a say in all these things. They're one of the reasons, that keeps the whole show. The business keeps the FBI on the road. They're relying again yesterday on COVID resilience funding from the government and more support. They're relying on UEFA. They're relying on decent terms from the banks. They have to wash their own face. And for that to happen, they need a strong commercial unit. They need someone back in the Irish team, and they need 50,000, 45,000 coming to every home game. And that's going to focus the minds of the FAI chiefs when they sit down in November. And there will be a review in November. Jonathan Hill has said that. He said it on the record, there will be a review. And that's why I think Kenny needs a strong finish. And if he doesn't get it, I think he could be in difficulty.
I think to link the performance of the team and the results to the lack of a sponsor is fairly disingenuous, to be honest. Because the main reason they don't have a sponsor is because of the wreckage that we read about in Champagne football. There's this ratings agency called RepTrack who gather the public's opinions on various companies and bodies throughout Ireland, and the FAI have ranked 100 out of 100 for 2 years running. They're below Irish Water and Facebook. Facebook are driving up local rents and dismantling global democracy, and they're still more popular than the FAI. So I don't think linking this team's performances and results thus far to the lack of a sponsor is fair. I think it's a fair point to make that the attendance at the Qatar game will be interesting, because ultimately the vehicle that runs the FAI is the senior team's ability to sell out the Aviva Stadium, and which they will do against Portugal, probably just because Cristiano Ronaldo's in town. I think that's a fair point, but I don't think the lack of a sponsor can be pinned on the fact that Stephen Kenny has won one game in 16.
Well, I'll reply to that, Gavin, if I may, because I think the word disingenuous, I think it is genuous. I think it's relevant. The senior women's team got a sponsor. If the men's senior team had done well, if they qualified for the Euro finals, which they didn't do, if they'd had a better Nations League campaign and not lost their third seeding, the World Cup, which ended up putting us in with Serbia, they might have got a sponsor. And if we were doing better in the World Cup with a chance of coming for a top two finish, I think we have a better chance of getting a sponsor. So I would disagree. I think they are linked.
Just on the point about the sponsor, obviously, I think we all know that there was a gambling firm in and the FAI turned them down. And I think that was the right thing for the FAI to do. It will be interesting to see who does want to associate with the Irish football team and what value they place on the association into the future. The one question about that, though, is how many managers in world football would actually be able to bring a sponsor and draw a crowd? I think there's an obvious on-the-shelf break glass in case of emergency solution who would bring hype and bring attention, but I'm not really sure that the right thing for Irish football is to go down the Roy Keane direction again. I've no doubt that it would bring a sponsor. It would certainly drive traffic, and you would sell tickets, and there would be mad hype for the first couple of games. But I guess, Philip, this comes back to the question, what are the alternatives out there in a post-Stephen Kenny world?
Yeah, that's been thrown at me a few times, and other journalists have colleagues. And FAI spoke about it as well. Within little circles. What do you do? Do you just break it up and go away, or and who's out there, and what can the FAI afford? They don't have an awful lot of money. Although I believe they are paying Kenny more than Ryan Giggs is getting at Wales. Although his situation is a bit different at the moment. But going back to the question of I think we all want to see the Irish team play the way Kenny wants it to play is good. I like it. But there's not an end product. We need to be, as Paul McGrath said in the Indo, we need to be a little bit more direct at times, mix it up a little bit. So is there another manager who can do that, who can bring us in, get our players to be comfortable on the ball, but every now and then know when to play the right pass, the forward pass? The first thing of any player should be to pass the ball forward. Second is pass it diagonal. Third is pass it sideways, and then pass it backwards. That's the fourth one. That's the basic tenet of coaching. So I think we need to be a little bit more direct. And I think we saw that when we went to Hungary for the friendly in June. They mixed it up a little bit. We saw plenty of it in Portugal. That was good. But at home, we're a little bit more we're a little bit too, I think, pedestrian. Okay, back to your point. Who's out there? Well, look, I mean, there's a lot of managers who are out there. I mean, for example, what young managers are out there who are associated with teams that play decent football, who worked off a small budget? Someone like Eddie Howe at Bournemouth would be one who would come to mind for me. He didn't have any money. He had very little money, and he brought that team to the Premier League on very modest resources, and they were known for playing a decent brand of football. That's just a name I would throw out there. I agree with you. The Roy Keane thing, Roy would be huge, to be sponsoring falling all over the Irish football team, and the 3 or 4 results would be fantastic, and then Roy would probably have a row with somebody, and it would probably end up in tears. So that may not be the result, the outcome. But it comes back to the bottom line. You know, do the FAI take a punt on Kenny for 2 more years and give him until Euro 2024? What if that hasn't worked? So that's what they have to decide. They're on the edge of the Niagara Falls. Do we go with Stephen Kenny in the barrel and take our chances we're going to land safely? Or do we roll back and go another direction? That's the question that they have to answer. And I think results will determine the answer of that dilemma that where we are in Irish football. And we're all talking about it. And it's good that it's healthy debate. That's why I go back to my earlier point. It's a results game. Results don't matter. What else does? Kenny needs to deliver results.
Would you be confident that someone like Eddie Howe would take a pay cut in comparison to, say, his previous salary at Bournemouth in order to manage the Republic of Ireland? Like, is it a realistic target, Philip?
It might be. Who knows? You don't have to ask him. You know, I mean, I don't know Eddie Howe. I don't know what his salary was at Bournemouth. I assume it was more. Look, but I'm just saying he's an example of somebody. I think who did well on a small budget and had a team that came from nowhere to punch above its weight. And let's be honest, and that comes back to a bit of sympathy I have for Kenny as well. We accept he doesn't have the firepower that Charlton had, or that even that O'Neill and McCarthy had to a certain degree. So whoever comes in has to do the best of what they have in front of them, and it will take a little while. I'm not quite sure, though. One other point, Kenny is kind of working from the top down, trying to sort of instill, the Irish senior team plays a certain way, all of the teams below should play a certain way. Maybe it should be inverted. We should have the under 15, 17s playing a certain way, so when they come up, they're ready to step into the senior team, a bit like what the Germans do. But look, would Eddie Howe take it for, I don't know, he's out of work for a while, pick up the phone and ask him. That's the way I would do it. And there are other managers out there as well, that might suit. Look, we're not going to get Zinedine Zidane or Antonio Conte, but, I know Alex Neil, I don't know what he did a reasonable job at Norwich, a reasonable job at Blackburn. I don't know, he's another that we mentioned. I don't know. Eddie Howe was the one that came to mind. But I agree with you. I think Roy Keane would be a short-term solution, and we don't want a short-term solution now. We need something that, if we are going to change, and there's no guarantee we're going to change, but I think if we do change, we need somebody to come in and still implement this type of football that Kenny is trying to play, only with a better end product.
Just one other thing, just to ask you, Philip. Like, it's probably there's 2 elements to your point there as well on the sponsorship and the revenue. So there's a sponsorship, obviously, and then you talk about the bums and seats for the Qatar game. Do you not think that there is a really strong public support out there that, regardless of the sponsor, that the fans are behind Stephen Kenny, are willing to show up, are willing to watch this team live and support them?
The fans are outstanding in the games against Azerbaijan and Serbia. And I mean, Gavin was there. We were there. They were terrific, and they helped the team. They almost sucked the ball into the south end for the late equalisers in both those matches. That's the end, by the way, we always score goals in. But you shouldn't overlook the fact that we hadn't had fans at matches for what it was 18 months. They were desperate to go and watch a game because it's an event. They'd be desperate to watch Ronaldo and crew against Portugal. So there's an element that the Irish fans have been starved of watching the team, so they want to get out and support them. I think there's 300 fans that made their way to Azerbaijan, and they'll make their presence felt on Saturday. So look, I think there is broadly as well support for what Kenny wants to do. But look, if Kenny had all these 16 games and there was, say, 7 or 8 at home and 9 away, I think the response might be a little bit different among the supporters. But we don't know that because they've only been there for a couple of games, and they've been good, and they would be very good against Portugal. Don't worry about that. So I think there's a little bit of you have to take that the fact that fans have been missing matches. They've been missing the drug of following the Irish football team.
I think they've also been fed up watching the Irish football team play the football that we played under Mick's second coming, under O'Neill and under Trapp, where the product wasn't very good. And I think, if it's interesting to hear you accept that we need to play a more progressive brand of football but want a better end product. I think everybody wants that. And I don't think for a second that Kenny is above criticism. We were critical of his positioning of Troy Parrott and his use of Troy Parrott essentially so far since Parrott has made it into the team. He's been playing at a position and it hasn't made any sense. Stephen Doyle was very critical of that decision on this show in the past as well. So, Gavin, what's your assessment of whether or not it's more or less likely that he is given the opportunity to take the squad through to the Euros? Because that's what we're talking about here today.
I think he probably should. Like, I mean, who's better than him on the budget that the FAI can pay, you know? Like, Eddie Howe did well in England, but, like, we can't go back down the route of hiring a manager who doesn't understand what's below the Irish football team. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any other football culture on earth that would treat the national team as a completely separate entity to everything else that goes on in the football culture of a country. And that's what the FAI in Ireland have done for decades. I mean, and we're seeing the fruits of it now, or the lack of fruits of it now. On the idea that Kenny should mix it up more, like, he has been mixing it up more. And as Philip alluded to, in an odd game, like, I mean, Ireland have averaged 43 long passes a game in qualifiers so far. That was 51 under Mick McCarthy. So it's less, but it's not significantly less. I mean, 11% of their passes have gone long in the qualifiers under Kenny so far. It was 8.5% of the Nations League last year under Kenny. So that shows a little bit more pragmatism, if you want to use that word. And under Mick and the last year under O'Neill, 14% of their passes went long. So they are mixing it up. I don't see the case for drafting in a guy, an Eddie Howe or some other manager who's worked in England, just because they've done well on a budget. It's a completely different job. And then, like, it's important to be competitive and qualify for the Euros in 2024. You bring in a new manager, there's a level of bedding in, and there's a level of transition that begins, and you kind of end up writing off results. I think you might as well use this campaign as that transition, as Stephen Kenny himself, I think, has alluded to by saying that he's building a team for Germany in 2024.
Yeah, Philip, I guess that's a good point that we probably should have addressed a little bit earlier on. That the complete lack of a football industry in this country has been sustained by the quality of results from the senior international team since 1987, maybe. It might be fair to go back to that. This feels to me like an opportunity for a proper conversation to be had by the FAI, which says, okay, this might well be rock bottom, but unless we link the League of Ireland, particularly post-Brexit, unless we link the League of Ireland somehow to the production line and the player pathway, this isn't going to be... There's no long-term fix for this, because we can't export our best young players to the UK anymore to get them trained in academies. That system is broken, and the future can't just be parachuting in expensive managers to somehow rescue results to get to a tournament where, you know, maybe the same thing happens as under Trapattoni and we get spanked in 3 games. Like, that's for me the main kind of bit of the joined up thinking that needs to happen here. And maybe it's not Stephen Kenny, but somebody needs to understand what the under-21s are doing, and, as you say, the style of play that they're having. And it seems like we're actually getting that direction under the good doctor at this point. So, like, that, for me, that's the reason to back Kenny and to give him the opportunity, because otherwise we're just hitting the reset button and have learned nothing.
I'll come in there, if I may. Just a couple of points to pick up what Gavin said there. I do think, actually, on your point there, Ger, I think post-Brexit there is going to be a different shake-up. I think Irish players are not going to be looking across the Irish Sea immediately. You look at Josh Cullen of Belgium. I think we're going to look at players going more to the continent, which I think is a good thing. But people sort of dismiss, the Trapattoni, O'Neill, McCarthy era, sort of dinosaurs, and I think it's been very harsh. The best football an Irish team has played in the last 12 years was against France in 2009 in Paris, and we played them off the park. We won 1-0 over 90 minutes.
There's a strong suggestion, Philip, on that night though, that the players ignored Trapattoni and went out. That's what they say happened. They didn't follow his instructions. Like, that's what all of the players on the night who we've ever spoken to claim happened that night. Yeah, well, that's the same player power. Maybe we should see some of that a bit more. But you can't ignore what Trapattoni did. He got us to within. He was part of that team. When he took over, he said, "Don't judge me on my record. Judge me on what I do here now going forward." And he won his first competitive away game. Martin O'Neill won his first game competitive was away from home. McCarthy won his first competitive game away from home. Kenny didn't do that. If he had done that, if he started getting results, he would have bought himself more time. And this Euro 24 red herring has been thrown in now in the last couple of months. Why didn't Kenny say that when he took over? At his first press conference in August 2020, he should have said, my challenge here is to build a team
and put structures in place that would sustain Irish football from the top bottom for and qualify for the European Championships in 2024. He didn't say any of that. He's only said that now. It's almost like he realises he needs to grasp at something that maybe he's sinking, he's in danger of going under. So he's saying, give me another 2 more years. If he'd said that back in August of last year, 14 months ago, and the FAI came out and backed him and said, yeah, you've got a 4-year deal, you've got a 4-year plan, things would have been different, but he didn't. So I just think Kenny is being, it's almost like we're ignoring the fact that the Euro playoffs went badly, the Nations League was a disaster, and the World Cup was over after 2 games. He's now saying, give me 2 more years. But we can't trust what's going to happen in the next 2 years is going to be better than what we've seen so far. You can't be sure of that. Cannot be sure of it.
You compare him to Mick McCarthy, and you say like Mick McCarthy won his first away game. Like, I presume you're referring to the second stint in Gibraltar there, and then also using the Nations League as an argument, which didn't necessarily go too well for Mick McCarthy either.
Was probably Mick wasn't in the Nations League. I think he was at the European Championships. He didn't do any Nations League matches.
Sorry, Martin. Apologies. That was in relation to Martin. My apologies. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Mick's second coming wasn't what wanted to be.
Then
but
Gibraltar for Mick, sorry.
But what he did do, though, is he got us to the last minute of the last qualifier against Denmark at home, where it was 1-1, and we were pushing to try and score a goal to qualify for the European Championship finals. Denmark got to the Euro semi-finals, and Switzerland got to the Euro quarter-finals. I don't think we were that bad. Mick has been much maligned, but this campaign, the World Cup, was over after 2 games.
Do you think he should have been kept on then, Philip?
Well, I think he should have been given the playoff. Yeah, I think there was a force majeure with COVID, and I think the FAI should have said you can carry the team into the playoff. Whether it would have made any difference, nobody knows. I think then Kenny, you see, could have been pushed down the line a little bit, which would have given them a bit more time to say, well, look, I've missed out in the Euro playoffs. I may have missed out in the Nations League because we may have got to the Euro finals. Who knows? And then he would have had this World Cup campaign to build for Euro 2024. Look, it's apples and pears. We'll never know now. But I thought Mick should have got the playoff. He didn't, and that's water under the bridge now. But he did get us to the final minutes of the Euro 2020 campaign, which I think people overlook.
Look, no need for us to relitigate Mick's record at this point. Maybe there is. Maybe that's the bit that actually is sticking in the craw of the people who don't think Stephen Kenny's doing a good job. I don't know. Maybe, but this probably isn't the time for it. You good instinct, Philip. Are the FAI going to stick or twist?
Good instincts. I've never called for Kenny to go, and he's a decent man, and I've a lot of time for him on a personal level. But I keep coming back to the bottom line, and I just do. I know you've kind of sort of shunted to one side, and Gavin doesn't necessarily agree with me about the commercial end of it, but I think that's a big factor. The crowd against Qatar is going to be crucial. I still say what I said at the start of this our chat. I still think he needs a big finish, and by that, certainly a win on Saturday, and a win against Luxembourg, and I think he's set fair for 2 more years. Anything less than that, and I think we could be gathered around Abbottstown in the middle of November, waiting for white smoke or otherwise to light up the sky. He's at a point now in his journey with the Irish football team where it's time to deliver. I'm sorry, and we're all talking about it, but the tail of the tape is ultimately what determines whether Stephen Kenny stays as Irish manager or not.
All right, Gavin Cooney, last word to you on this. Are they going to get that result this weekend?
Yes, why not? But I think that they probably should. I mean, you look since Robbie Keane retired, Jerry, the only teams that we've beaten in competitive home games are Moldova, Georgia twice, and Gibraltar. So, it shouldn't be a massive surprise that we couldn't beat Azerbaijan at home. And they scored, only they had relatively few shots in the game and scored from distance. So, the margins in these games have not been very large, in these games against minnows. So drawing against Azerbaijan is obviously bad, but it doesn't wear the sheen of abject disgrace when you compare it to our struggles since Robbie retired. So Ireland are a better team than Azerbaijan, and like Philip said, they have been better away from home so far under Stephen Kenny. So hopefully they will deliver that result this weekend, and we can stop talking about progress and start talking about results.
All right, Philip, Gavin, good stuff this morning. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers. It's 8:44 this morning here on OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Will O'Callaghan is with us. Good morning to you, Will. How are you?
Morning, lads. How you getting on?
We're a bit late there. That went a bit over because of the line issues early on. What is the crack? Where are we starting? Newcastle, the Hurling All-Stars. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think we'll start with the Hurling All-Stars. Limerick dominating the list. 15 nominations, potentially could have the entire team. The record previously, joint record, Limerick last year with 9, along with the Dublin footballers. Beaten finalists Cork have got 9 players shortlisted for this year. Waterford 7 and Kilkenny 5. 3 each for Clare and Tipperary, 1 each for Dublin, Laois and Wexford. The goalkeepers, Patrick Collins of Cork, Owen Murphy of Kilkenny and Nicky Quaid of Limerick. Limerick dominating the nominees for the defenders, particularly Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey, Barry Nash, Diarmuid Burns, Kyle Hayes and Captain Declan Hannon. Tim O'Mahony, Sean O'Donoghue, Mark Coleman and Robert Downey of Cork, all shortlisted. Callum Lyons, Kieran Bennett and Conor Prunty of Waterford in the running. Hugh Lawler and Paddy Deegan of Kilkenny, Cathal Barrett and Ronan Marr of Tipperary and Rory Hayes of Clare. The midfielders, Will O'Donoghue and Dara O'Donovan of Limerick. Cathal Malone and Tony Kelly picked at midfield for the nominations of Clare. Jamie Barron of Waterford and Laois's Paddy Purcell. Forwards, Garrod Hegarty, Keane Lynch, Tom Morrissey, Peter Casey, Seamus Flanagan and Aaron Gillan, all of Limerick. Corp representatives here are Seamus Harnedy, Patrick Horgan, Shane Kingston and Jack O'Connor. Waterford have got Stephen Bennett, Ozzie Gleeson and Desi Hutchinson. There's Owen Cody and TJ Reid of Kilkenny, Danny Sutcliffe of Dublin, Jason Ford of Tip and Lee Chin of Wexford. John Kiley's Limerick also dominating the nominations for the Hurler of the Year award. The strong favourite here is the 2018 winner Keane Lynch to pick up his second. He is shortlisted alongside Sean Finn and Kyle Hayes. Kilkenny's Owen Cody, Cork's Shane Barrett and Clare's Aidan McCarthy are also in the running to be named the Young Hurler of the Year. If you want to review any of those, the full list of the nominees is up on otbsports.com. The Gaelic Players Association is set to reveal their position later this morning on potential changes to the structure of the Football Championship. Croke Park will hold a special congress later this month where delegates will vote on a pair of proposals. Proposal A would keep slightly altered provincial championships tied to the All-Ireland Series, but inter-county players, we understand, strongly favour Proposal B after consultation in recent weeks, which would see the championship played on a similar format to the league. Newcastle fans have been warned not to expect massive spending from their proposed new owners. A Saudi-led consortium could complete a deal to purchase the Premier League club as soon as this weekend. Some of the newspapers suggesting it could even go through today. It's after a dispute between Qatar-based beIN Sports and Saudi Arabia over media piracy was resolved. However, it's believed the Saudi Investment Fund see Newcastle as an investment and not a vanity project. Despite that, host of the True Faith Newcastle United podcast, who's Alex Hurst, he says there's optimism among supporters about a big transfer window in January.
The team does need a lot of investment. The team does need improved. You know, there's all sorts of rumours go around on social media about Haaland and people like that. But at the minute, we just want Callum Wilson back fit. That would do me for Spurs in a couple of weeks' time. But if the club, it does go through, January be the first opportunity for new owners to make a real statement about the football club. So really excited for a change about a January transfer window.
In case you missed that, there's all sorts of rumours floating around about Haaland and stuff. Just in case you missed that, that was a Newcastle podcast. There's all sorts of rumours floating around Haaland. I mean, is it Alf Inge Haaland? I mean, I understand stranger things have happened. I mean, am I stupid here? Is there a possibility that they could just back up Brinks truck somewhere in Saudi, fill it, drive it to his gaff in Dortmund and say, you are now officially Scrooge McDuck. Here is 200 million for you alone. Is that?
Well, can you imagine the Qatar Investment Fund would have quite a truck of money themselves to be able to bring him to PSG? I'm sure Bayern Munich could pay him quite well if Haaland was to leave at the end of this year when he becomes quite affordable. He's available for around €100 million. He is going to be the hottest ticket next year along with Mbappe if he doesn't sign a new contract. But I can't imagine Mbappe or Haaland will be moving to Tyneside. I think all the soundings seem to be that they're going to be reasonable, maybe some investment to put a team around St. Maximin, but I can't imagine that Newcastle are going to be making massive signings. Like, it's one of those things, Ger, when you hear some journalists saying that they want Newcastle back to where they belong. I was thinking about it last night. They won the league nearly 100 years ago. They've been in the top 4 in the English top flight 5 times since the start of the 1960s. There seems to be this kind of mythical belief, maybe because of the way that they were under Keegan and Dalglish at the end of the 90s, that Newcastle are somehow getting rid of the 14-year Mike Ashley regime and they're going to just go back up towards the sum of the table. Like, I can totally understand Newcastle fans wanting rid of Mike Ashley. I'm not quite sure if the sports washing of the Saudi royal family is much of a better proposal, really.
But it turns out we don't care. Fans don't care. Like, you know, because it's impossible all the time to think about all of the bad things that are associated with your team, particularly in the moment when player X scores 97th minute winner and you're like, wow, what an amazing thing we've just witnessed. Look at that athletic ability. That is why sport has such power, is because it makes us forget things.
Yeah, and look, you have to have that kind of amnesia as a sports fan. And like, not for a moment would I suggest that Newcastle fans actually have any kind of power over this. Like, they tried extremely hard to get rid of Mike Ashley with protests along the way. They're not going to be able to stop the Saudi investment fund from taking over. The only thing that could really stop that now would be the Premier League. But
don't go to games. Everybody agrees we're not going to games. We're just not going, and no one goes. If there's like a 0 attendance at a match, I think that might have some impact. But it's never going to happen. It just is never going to happen.
But say if Newcastle can pick off some players from, say, Barcelona, Real Madrid, or some of the European super clubs who'd be looking to shift players next summer, and they've got high quality signings coming in, can you really expect like a remarkably loyal fan?
52,000 are showing up. Tops off. Thanks very much. Yeah. Belly's a jiggle. Let's go. That's the Newcastle way. Anything else, Will?
Well, Italy's historic 37-game unbeaten run came to an end last night. The European champions losing 2-1 to Spain and Milan. Great game in the semi-finals of the Nations League. Ferran Torres scoring both goals for Luis Enrique's side, where the Barcelona midfielder Gavin became the youngest ever player to play for Spain at 17 years of age. Belgium will entertain France tonight in the second semi-final. That's in Turin at 7:15. The Republic of Ireland's under-17s, they kick off their European Championship qualifying campaign this evening. Colin O'Brien's side up against Andorra at Turner's Cross. 7 p.m. start there. We've got golf at the Spanish Open. After the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship, John Murphy, the Kinsale amateur, will be out in action there. Jonathan Caldwell and Cormac Sharvin also playing today in Madrid. They tee off in around an hour's time. And overnight, Ireland secured a bronze medal in the 4-kilometre women's team pursuit at the European Track Cycling Championships in Switzerland. Kelly Murphy, Mia Griffin, Emily Kay and Alex Sharp finishing 3 seconds ahead of Great Britain in the third place ride-off. All in good timing ahead of potentially a velodrome being built here in Ireland as well.
We will be an unstoppable juggernaut once that velodrome gets built. Will, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Will O'Callaghan. More stuff from Will across the day on otbsports.com. It's 8:51 this morning. We're turning our attention back to hurling. I'm delighted to say James Skehill is back with us. James, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, Joe. How's it going?
Good. We planned this when we saw that it looked like Micheál Donoghue was out, but just when we thought he was out, they suck him back in. Examiner this morning reporting that he's not out of the running entirely for the Galway job. This is fast becoming as interesting a soap opera as the situation in Kerry. What's going to happen? Tell us what you think is going to happen.
I'll tell you what I think will happen and I'll tell you what should happen. What I think will happen is that there's a possibility that a candidate might be rushed through in the next couple of weeks because they've set themselves a deadline. What I hope will happen and what should happen is that time should be taken by the interview committee or the interview panel, should I say, to work on relations with Micheál and try and get this appointment done. And if it takes 2 months, 3 months, so be it. But don't rush the appointment just for the sake of appointment. I know we had the county chairman coming out last week saying that the deadline was middle of October. There's no reason to put a deadline on a position as important as this. Like if you were nominating a manager for a club, you would carry out due diligence and make sure that the position was filled by the right person as opposed to the position being filled fast. So I would hope that time would be taken and everyone would come on the same board and essentially just try work with Micheál to get him back into position. But again, that's what should happen. What I think will happen is there's a couple of things here I'm going to go into a bit deeper than this. Is that I was in the dressing room in 2017, let's say, in the final, and Micheál has a great vision, right? And he's the type of person who I would class as a great leader, right? And like great leaders will convince you can do great things. You know what I mean? They might do it in your grasp, but he'll convince you can do them anyways. And he said in the dressing room after the game, after winning Ireland, he'd nearly forgotten about that Ireland we just won moments ago and was looking towards the future, trying to build. And he was aiming it at the players to up their game as best they could. But he was really throwing task at the board and trying to get them to implement, connectivity for all teams and get going with player development and get joined up thinking and get on the same page so we can create like a Galway wave, as Joe Connolly used to call it. And that just didn't happen. You know what I mean? And I think what a big issue is that Micheál's ambition and his view for Galway as a whole is not being matched on the other side of the table. That's why I think he's kind of reluctant to come back into the position, because like his ambition is so grand. Like he envisages multiple Irelands for Galway. He envisages 13 and 14-year-olds coming under Lux's wing and all a pathway getting towards the senior team, joined up thinking, collective thinking, and a pathway to success. But that's just, again, that's met with resistance, to be honest.
Why?
Why is a good question. I think the GAA as a whole, a certain GAA community, and especially people who are in the office positions, right, they're slow churners when it comes to change or when it comes to modernisation. Like we've seen over the past couple of weeks, the debate with regards to football proposals. And from a player perspective, the obvious thing is to go with the league type format, which is the best thing for everyone. But that's why I struggle to understand why people on the opposite side of the table are saying that the provincial championship is still perfect. But my point is, it's a slow churner, and it's like it takes forever for the GA to inflict change, And I just don't see anyone in Galway putting their head above the parapet to try and change things a small bit, because yes, a vision is grand, it's great, but it takes finance, it takes a lot of work, it takes subcommittees, it takes huge fundraising and approaching people and asking for money and getting things going to get where you want to go. And like I just started to look at Tyrone to say how do they come on board, because they kind of, yes, they were in semi-finals, but they weren't really serious contenders. And you look at the Tyrone team this year and what have they got behind them? And then I got looking a bit deeper and I saw Garvahy, and I saw that facility was built for £7 million, and it had 10 dressing rooms, 4 for women, and it was done with 200 members in Tyrone giving £5,000 each. Like that's colossal fundraising. That's huge thinking. You know what I mean? Huge thinking, grand thinking for something bigger for Tyrone, and then win the Ireland this year. I just think there's a bit of resistance because we're stuck in our ways a bit, and I think we're quite content as a Galway group. If we run off the club championship, everyone's happy in the clubs. We're all good. You know what I mean? I think if there's no drama in the club championship and it's run off, okay, that's considered a success, I think, in this country.
I don't really understand. Like all my life, the Galway hurlers have been gifted physically. The skill set has been there, the athleticism has been there, the bravery has been there, and like I know you guys got over the line eventually, but it feels a little bit like you're one of those teams that left a couple behind you. And
absolutely,
the conversation you're having with us now, the Limerick model is the model, isn't it? Like that's the joined up thinking. And it goes back to the investment and the money, and fair enough. But like every county has access to these funds if they go and ask for them, and if they shake the tree in the right way, and if they have a visionary, like Micheál Donoghue would say to local businesses, this is what's going to happen to our community if we invest properly. Here's where your money's going to go. I'm going to make sure that every pound, shilling and pence is accounted for. And this is the potential that we have within us, particularly given the tradition that Galway hurling has. Like, I don't know, that like I think back to Eoin Ryan and how the hair would stand up in the back of your neck when he was getting it. I think back to Joe Cooney. Like, that's your tradition. You guys own that. That's an unbelievably powerful elixir.
Correct. It's the tradition in Galway is huge. Like I grew up hearing about stories about specifically Tony Keating and Eoin Ryan because my mother is from Clonmerdale, and I heard it, and they became two heroes of mine, I'd say. And you look at those guys and you say, right, I want to continue that. And like when I came out of minor, we won a couple of minors, and I thought, geez, I'm going to win 5 All-Irelands here, handed, because we're so good at minor level and 21s that it's just a matter of time before all this is put together at senior. And God, I got some shock. And to get 1 out of 14 years, I count myself as a lucky duck, right? When you consider that we went up against good teams, yes, but we left some behind us, and there was instances like going off the pitch that, and even deeper off the pitch that didn't help us in any way, shape or form. And I think of the county, and like I struggle at times, and I get a bit upset and a bit angry, and I get a bit wound up to say when I start talking about it, because there's such passion inside in Galway to try and get success, And I just don't think that's reflected, at board level, if I'm honest. As I said to you, and I might keep repeating myself here, right? But I think if the club championship goes off well, everybody's happy in Galway. And like I just looked into the committee, there's 22 members in that board committee, and you can be sure come December they'll all move around. This lad goes to that position, that lad goes to that position, and all the same top tier will remain in the same position, and there'll be no change inflicted. That's why I heard rumours recently of a local businessman, Mick Culhan, who went up a couple of years ago to run for the chairmanship and wasn't successful, but he's interested again. And like if he was interested, he'd be the type of person who again would have a grand thinking. Like he ran a very, very successful international business, would have a good means to an end, say, and I think his vision would match that of what the players and management would be. So you need someone like that who's going to stick their head above the parapet and really inflict change across the board. And it's going to be tough to do, because you see anything that the GAA has done in history. Let me give you an example. Sean Kelly, when we were Rule 42, he got a lot of ridicule for that, you know what I mean? But he put his head above the parapet, and now it's classed as a great decision looking back with hindsight. And I just think that someone came in like Mick Culhan, came on board, got a whole host of business people around him in from a financial perspective, because a lot of the games nowadays are driven by finance. I think I won't say it's well publicised, but in inner circles it's well documented that Teneo gave Tipperary in the region of €1 million, let's say, at the time doing the Ireland 19. And that's the scale we're at. We're not like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not underappreciating what people give in the couple 100,000, let's say, for main sponsorship. But, and again, it's going to sound a bit ridiculous in one sense, but it's just not enough in today's game. And it's not going to the players, it's just putting all the infrastructure in place and putting all the basics in place for a team to thrive. Like, you consider Micheál, and I don't know where you like me saying this, but Micheál and his managed team over the course of their tenure raised in the region of $500,000 themselves, to try and fund, their team and fund their ambition, you could say. Look, and again, you might think I'm going around the house a small bit here, but to go back to the issue at hand is the manager. And for me, it's Micheál as the manager. And I think the players would, as from what I gather, would like and would really be excited for Micheál to go back again, because they know they're getting a real, they're getting a CEO of a business who's going in to run this thing. You know what I mean? And it's just, I think every effort should be made to go back and mend relations or inflict the change that's needed in order to get that man back as manager.
When you talk about that lack of a willingness to put one's head above the parapet in relation to the Galway County Board, was that something that you were acutely aware of as a playing group in 2015 when you come close to taking strike action? You knew that something drastic had to be done in order to make decisions at county board level.
Yeah, I think we were a very strong group back then. Like, I'm not saying the group now aren't strong, but just when I had experience of it back then, we were a very strong group. I think we had people inside in that group as the players who could, who if they wanted to, would be very politically based and would be able to debate well and carry themselves well. And I won't say take on people, but at least hold themselves really well, in getting their views across and their point across. And the strike was no problem. That was going to be a full-on strike. And what the board said to us that time, and this is the truth, it's not made up, was that we don't want player power. And that phrase gets on my nerves, because that wasn't player power. That was just, again, like with the IRFU ladies, the ladies soccer team, that there needs to be change, let's say, in order to get what they need to thrive. And we understood at the time that the setup that we were involved in was not good enough. It wasn't sufficient to challenge the big teams. So we wanted change, and we were prepared to do essentially anything, you could say, go as far as mediation, or as far as you want to go in order to get change. And eventually, we got not what we wanted, but what we needed, and then we got to Ireland. And I don't know, if something as drastic as that is to happen right now, you know what I mean? I myself, coming from a very staunch background, and say in my beliefs, in the sense that Micheál is the man, I'd go for it. I would just stand down and make sure that he comes back on board as the manager. And like we met when he stood down a couple of years ago, it's for the same reasons. For the same reasons he won't come back now, or is reluctant somewhat to come back, are the same reasons as the reason he stood down. It's not family, because the team, when someone walks away from a county team, or someone walks away from a position, it's family or work reasons. Everyone has given up something. Every player has given up something. The physio has given up something. Everyone's given up a minor bit of themselves to be in that position. And 9 times out of 10, the family is the large percentage of that, right? So I don't think that's an issue. That's going to happen. I think what the issue was that he really wanted to explore Galway and make it a grander thing than what it was, and we were kind of stagnant. And that's where I feel we're at the minute. Right now, we're really, really stagnant. And as much as I hate to say it, guys, I feel like Galway are right back square one where we were in 2015.
Can I ask you then about that conversation when he comes and tells you as a group that he's reached a point of frustration, that the stagnation is what the future is going to be, even if he continues? What's that conversation like with you guys? Is it like are you...
Very difficult. We were obviously all in the room, and like, it's a rarity. Like, if you see grown men cry, let's say, it's usually down to success for achieving something huge. You know what I mean? Or if you see grown men cry in a team environment, it's because you're after suffering a devastating loss. You know what I mean? And I was in that room, let's say, and there was multiple lads crying, because we understood what we were losing. And that's why we all came together as a player group and tried to fight to keep him. But there was no appetite whatsoever to change on the other side of the table. No appetite whatsoever. And then Micheál, ultimately, I think it's a bit like when you shake a Coke bottle and open the cap. You know what I mean? He just had enough. You know what I mean? Because I'd say it was just a constant battle to try to get better standards, get better infrastructure. Try to get ahead of athletic development and get grouped up thinking amongst all the managers and all the teams, as opposed to being so fractious and so singular minded. You know what I mean? There's a very individualistic mind amongst some of the managers, that say, across the board. in terms of grouped up thinking. And that's very, that itself is tough to handle as a senior manager when you're trying to get, buy-in from other managers who are feeding your team as well with the youth, Very tough conversation, a ridiculous conversation in the sense that it caught us off guard at the time, and like we're after coming back off the back of a difficult season, but that was all noted, and we were kind of looking forward to really hammering home a new season, and that didn't transpire. So I just think it's been time lost. Time we'll never get back again.
Can you explain that timeline of events, James? So Micheál Donoghue says he's had enough, he's leaving, and then you mentioned there that you guys made representations on behalf of Micheál Donoghue to the county board. Is that what happened?
So you can imagine, Owen, there's like a how do they call it, a grieving period. You know what I mean? So like we're in an element of shock. So the first thing is kind of damage limitations. Okay, how do we stop this from happening? How do we stop this knee-jerk reaction and make sure Micheál and all the management team just pause for a second and come back? So there was like a week there of conversations with management and with members of management to try and just kind of stop their decision and think and come back, and just we'll fix this, right? So commit, come back, and we can fix it later. And that kind of, I think what players, we weren't privy to information or privy to instances throughout his tenure that he would have seen. We obviously didn't bring it to our attention, but I think it got to melting point. So that was the first week. And then us as a group would have met, like any team does this, like they would have met collectively a few times and trying to hammer out how can we fix these issues, how can we approach the board and try and mend all this, somewhat act as a somewhat of a mediation position. And then it just got messy. It became a he said, she said, you did, I did, and it became a real political battle. And for a finish, Micheál was just tired of it and said, no, we just have to stop. And then players themselves got a touch tired of it, and we kind of accepted that Micheál wasn't going to come back. Hence, a new line or new path had to be walked. But that was probably a 2 or 3 or 4 week process, even though that was difficult. And there was a lot of meetings in house amongst players, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, a lot of deliberation over certain people and their positions, and how can we impact change ourselves. And ultimately, we had to go with the direction of the board and find a new manager.
Did that have an impact on the playing group and their relationship with the board? And were any of you concerned about your own playing role as a result of being seen as leaders or ringleaders of the movement to keep him?
Yeah. Well, going back to the 2015 time, just for a second, there was the Super Six, we call it, let's say, in the sense that there were 6 lads that the previous manager had identified as the ringleaders. And he was so far wrong in terms of who the 6 guys were. First of all, ironing out 6 people as the ringleaders was just, and I was one of those guys, and like, I didn't, excuse my language, I don't give a shit. Like, if a new manager comes in and puts in a good setup and I'm dropped, that's fine. It takes, that's not a selfish mindset. That's a collective mindset for us all to thrive. And bear in mind, I'm not on the team. I retired. I'm finished for this forthcoming year. So like, from a playing perspective, nothing to do with me. I just want to see my club mates, my county mates, and the youth coming up into a very high thriving position under a good manager. That's what I want. Whether I'm going to get it or not, or we're going to get it, it remains to be seen. So, and again, players aren't contracted. We have no contracts that we can sit in the sideline pretend to be injured, right? We can be dropped in an instant. Again, like there's guys, real good, like teammates that I've played for before. When a new manager comes in, he drops 10 guys in an instant and doesn't give them a chance to, walk away themselves. But that's a different story entirely. So I was never afraid of any kind of ramifications from a board or from management. I was willing to accept that. But you can be sure that there are players, right? And it's the same in every group. It's the same in every business environment, every group setting across the board, that they will look at themselves first. They'll look for I suppose, self-sufficiency and for themselves to survive, and then they look at the group next. But I think in the Galway team at the minute, in terms of players, it's overwhelmingly group first. Overwhelmingly. There might be 1 or 2, let's say, that's unbeknownst to me at the minute, but it's overwhelmingly the group ethos is group first and individual second.
The potential at the moment, and there are various names out there. Davy Fitt's name is not going to go forward, or not going to be allowed to be put forward if Micheál Donoghue is in for the job. But there's a possibility Micheál Donoghue isn't in for the job, and some of the clubs might nominate Davy. Is that still a possibility in your view? Is it possible that next season Davy Fitz is actually the Galway manager?
Look, when you're talking about Galway, like anything is possible. He himself came out and said he wasn't interested in the job. Publicly said it, right? But saying it publicly is one thing, but then the inner workings of phone calls and meetings is another thing. And I don't know what club has nominated him on the back of what what he's done in the past. But as I've said before, and it's well documented, and people have said it to me, whether in a positive or negative light, that they think I don't like Davy Fitz. It's not that I don't like them. Like, personal has nothing to do with them. It's the business side of this, let's say, and it's his actual ethos in training a team that I don't agree with, and it's not suitable for Galway. So is there a possibility? Probably a 5% chance. Is it going to turn to reality? I would say no. I just don't think he'll be well accepted amongst the players, as I said to you before. I just think that's more media and newspapers trying to fill some column inches and trying to drive a bit of hysteria around the whole position. I think it's down, realistically speaking, to 3 in-house Galway people, and well, maybe now even 2 at the moment in terms of, in my opinion, it's Micheál. He should be, again, hounded to take the job, but also he should be approached in a very civil manner and a politically correct manner, and trying to get some of his thinking and some of his, as I say, pathways to success implemented for him to come back. There's him, and there's also probably the possibility of the Trinity manager, I'd say Jeffrey Linsky, who, again, it's not been stated publicly because the names haven't been released. It's only because it's the inner workings, the inner circles that you hear these things. But in reality, the only 2 options at the minute are Micheál and Jeffrey. And I think Micheál is the clear winner in terms of record, in terms of, approachability amongst players and man management, etc. So to answer your question, that was a roundabout answer. I apologise.
No, it's perfect.
I don't think it's going to be running for Davy Fitz in Galway.
Okay.
It is. Sorry, go for it.
No, you go on.
I just kind of have, like, beyond the managers, it's kind of like this kind of theme that's come up during this conversation, James. This sort of wider conversation about Galway and how they actually reach their potential. Like, Micheál Donoghue sounds like a phenomenal manager, but from what you're saying, getting the right managerial appointment now isn't going to fix all the issues in Galway. And it just kind of came into my head the other day about the strikes in Limerick around the turn of the decade, and had that not led to radical enough change within the county, there's a chance Limerick with their golden generation would have won in All-Ireland, and there would have been that level of contentment. But we never would have known how great this Cian Lynch era would have become, the possibility of matching that Kilkenny team. Like, is that overstating the level of importance that a county board and the systems in place can actually have on the success of a team? And is there a level of regret that you have looking at what's happened with Galway?
I have a massive level of regret, huge level of regret, because again, it was my own time playing that I think we should have won more, and we left games behind us. And the cynic will look at the player and blame the player, but it's a much deeper issue than that. Like, it's a far greater collective that puts the player onto the pitch. That all the preparation was into, like, the 95% of the whole year was preparation, 5% is playing, even less. You know what I mean? And it's a lot deeper than that. And it's the small things, like when you consider strike action is severe. Yes, it's severe, right? But it's necessary. And like, I know in terms of change, I know she stepped down, but Tracy Kennedy in Cork did good work in Cork. I look at Michael Duignan. Like, Michael Duignan was heavily challenged for the chairmanship, let's say, or he heavily challenged for the chairmanship in Offaly. And now there's a buzz about Offaly because he's putting a focus and he's putting a bit of eclectic thinking into Offaly. And now there's a buzz on both sides of the ball, small ball and big ball, if you know what I mean, in terms of them winning. So that's kind of what Galway, they need a figurehead who's a public figurehead and who can approach each club, individually without any baggage, and look to go forward. You know what I mean? Like, just Galway is a bit. There's bits of Galway that are rotten, if I'm honest, right? I know firsthand of a delegate who went into a convention and went against the wishes of his club and put down the opposite name of a candidate for chairmanship. You know what I mean? He was given clear direction to put down name B, and he went in himself on a tangent to put down name A, because it treats himself as an individual. He probably got a ticket to a game, or probably got some sort of promise, and then he put his vote sideways. He went against the wishes of a club and went on a tangent. That kind of instance, right, is across the board. It's absolutely across the board. It's a political game in Galway in the sense that there'll be promises made and they won't be fulfilled, But however, once the roles are maintained and all the cronyism is maintained, everybody's happy, let's say, and then clubs and people and players and supporters are effectively powerless.
You must be getting close to the level where you're thinking, I have to get involved at that level. Like, I know it's kind of signing up for a life in purgatory.
I do. Look, sir, I'm not interrupting your question. The last time I spoke with you, I touched on Galway, and I had a couple of people approach me face to face, fair play, and that's what I prefer, face to face, and say, why don't you do something about it? And I'm saying, I will, in time. I'm 33, I'm still playing, I have a young family. In fairness, I don't have probably the time or the real energy focus. My focus is on 2 small kids and playing myself. But in a few years' time, absolutely, I'm going in some shape or form, whether that be into a coaching capacity for an underage team, or as a facilitator to a senior team, or into some sort of chairmanship, my own club, something like that. But I can tell you here now for sure, I will be getting into it, you know, and maybe I'm a bit strong-minded and maybe I don't have the same savviness as some guys that, like, if I want change, I want it now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want it now and I can't see the reason as to why it can't happen now. Maybe that affects me or impacts me because, again, as I said, GA in inputting change is a bit of a slower turner, so I might be social. But to answer your question, yes, it's in my mind. Is it at the forefront of my mind? No, it's not. It's at the back of my mind for a few years yet.
33 is not too old to make a comeback.
But, you know, I hope my wife isn't listening, but if I did, I think I'd be divorced. Yeah, I think I'd be divorced, yeah.
Well, we don't want that. James, it's been brilliant as ever chatting to you. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Okay, guys, see you.
It's James Skehill there. Always brilliant stuff. And like that potential that's right there, if you look back at their underage success and the quality of hurler that they've produced. And again, it's not one type of hurler. They don't just produce halfbacks. They produce free scoring forwards and have done, and they produce small nippy corner forwards and giant of men who can play full forward or centre forward. They had some of the best halfbacks that we've ever seen, and I don't know, there's something there. There's like a Limerick level of quality of player coming through in groups, but it's really interesting to hear somebody who's been on the inside who feels that they underachieved saying that we underachieved and this is why we underachieved.
Because that was certainly the theory maybe going into the 19 season. I know Limerick don't end up winning it, but there was a sense that if they were and they were favourites, that Galway would be the team to take them down. And I wonder, have we actually just missed out on a great Limerick-Galway rivalry?
Oh, we saw bits of it. We definitely saw bits of it. Like, maybe it's not over. 15 minutes past 9. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, here's what's coming up in OTB Sports Radio today. OTB Gold is Jerry Eisenberg talking about Muhammad Ali. Live from 2 o'clock, it is The Snap, looking back on Brady Belichick and looking ahead to the weekend. Leaders' questions with Stuart Lancaster from 3. Our retro panel is Losing the Dressing Room. OTB Gold is Chris Waddle at 6, and the show is live with Nathan from 7 tonight. We're going to bring you Rory O'Connor and Niamh Briggs talking rugby in a few minutes, but next, Derval O'Rourke.
OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Were you much of a dessert man in the canteen, or did you completely eschew any kind of sweet things as a footballer?
Absolutely not. Friday nights in hotels, I used to look forward to it. You used to get rice pudding or apple crumble and custard, and I wouldn't care if Ronaldo or anyone walked through the door. There was almost stopping me getting it, to be honest. I was straight up for it. It was something I really look forward to. Ronaldo wouldn't have stopped me getting my apple crumble on Friday night, I promise you that.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
Car insurance is boring, but you don't have to be. Get Set Go is the kind of car insurance you can sort in a few minutes online, then bounce on with your day. Are you ready for Quick Start Insurance? Get a quote now at getsetgo.ie. MCL Insurance Services Ireland Limited, trading as getsetgo.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
17 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. You're very welcome. If you'd like to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. And of course, the YouTube channel is open. You can leave a comment there as well. This Friday is World Egg Day. To celebrate, Derval O'Rourke has teamed up with Board Bia for their Crack On campaign to promote quality mark eggs as a natural fuel for a busy, healthy lifestyle. You can find more inspiration for egg recipes at boardbia.ie/egg/crack-on. Derval O'Rourke, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
We're pretty good. We had a bit of a debate early in the show and we power ranked our eggs. Owen, you need to do the needful here. You're the one that has the
Well, there's a correct order on eggs, Derval, which I'm sure you'll agree with. Number 4 is boiled, number 3 is poached, number 2 is fried, and number 1 is scrambled. I'm sure you'll have no disagreements with that list.
Oh, okay. No, this is going to be problematic.
Right.
I think I would go. It's controversial, but I like just a simple boiled egg.
Okay, this is a problem.
Shocking. What, number 1?
Yeah, like I would put boiled number 1.
What?
And then if I'm going to be fancy, because recently I've started to lean into poached more, because I feel like if you make someone a boiled egg, they're a bit like, really? But if you make someone a poached egg, they're like, oh my God, thanks for the poached egg. So just to get credit, I've leaned in more to poached eggs recently and I'm nailing them. So I'm going boiled, poached, fried, scrambled last.
So you're literally the opposite. Literally the opposite. I mean, we've had some controversial takes on this show, Derval, but I think that's right up there. And are you using a poacher or are you doing them naturally?
No, I just boil the water, get it to a simmer, literally drop in a couple of bits of vinegar. I actually did this last night on leek fritters, unreal bit, and then I drop in my egg and I look at it and I believe and have faith in it. That's a big part of my poaching the eggs. I feel like mentally looking at it going, I have faith in you to be delicious. And then I do it about 3 minutes, scoop it out, and yeah, there you go. I don't use any sort of poaching machine. And Mairead Ronan made me poached eggs recently, and she used a kind of contraption to do it.
Yeah.
And it made me not give her as much credit.
I agree. No. I think we've got to the bottom of all the problems here, Derval. He's talked about the poacher. Once you start involving any equipment other than the saucepan, the water, the vinegar, and the thing, that's it. No, you don't understand that. Like there's been a small investment of small time, and you get this delicious gooiness at the end of it.
And it's gooey. I put this thing up on Instagram the other day saying, yolk gooey or not, and I assumed everybody would say gooey, and they didn't. That threw me as well. I was like, whoa, what is wrong with 30% of people? Thank God 70% went gooey.
Slightly high percentage of psychopaths following you on Instagram, it turns out.
Sickos follow you.
They have a bit gooey. It's very important.
Well, I like that was it. I mean, I agree with you. I think that fried eggs are critically underappreciated, particularly as a hangover food. They're my go-to. We had Paul O'Connell in recently talking about his interest in nutrition and how it evolved over the course of his career, and how various people would come to training with ideas and they would all follow those ideas because, you know, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, essentially. And I'm really interested for you, like obviously at the end of your career, you end up being synonymous with high quality, good food. You've written numerous cookbooks about it and you've become an ambassador for good quality food. Were you like that at 15, 16? Did you know that this was an important part of being a world-class sprinter?
No, I was absolutely horrendous with food when I was a teenager, hence why it's such an evolution. So my mum laughs a lot because she's just like, clearly, like, you're now a completely different person to the one where she was grating vegetables into my food because I was refusing to eat them as a teenager. So when I was a teenager, would have found eating lots of variety of food really difficult, but I was running all the time, and like it wasn't really necessarily a problem then. And because I had such like a good typical Irish mammy who was grating vegetables into my food and completely doting on me, I got away with it. And then I went to college and I moved out of home and nobody was cooking for me. So that transition was really difficult for me, and I ended up getting injured, sick, just having a complete shocker for like 1 or 2 years in college. And then I went to the Athens Olympics and got really sick before that. I got like severe food poisoning, got an appendicitis, and I got injured. And that was the trigger for going, yeah, okay, maybe I need to start looking at everything. And food was the big thing I started to get interested in. So it was from 2004. But what's fascinating now is like back then, it wasn't as big an element of sport and prep that it is now. It wasn't the world it is now. So when I started really looking at it, even my coaches at the time were like, it was just almost like something I was gone off on a tangent doing, considering all the food I was eating. And I just started learning. So like I would contact different people. Sonia Sullivan was one of them, and say, okay, who do you know that could help me with this? And started talking to different dietitians, different nutritionists. And when I travel, I talk to like the dietitian on, say, the German team, because I always felt like the German team were always on it. Like they're always very detail orientated. And I just talked to everybody, and I really enjoyed that. And then I figured that it was about performance, right? Because I wanted to eat well to ultimately run well. But then I actually really started to enjoy cooking. So then what I started to do is I had all these notebooks with okay, these are all the ingredients that I've been told are really good for me. But no one was kind of telling me how to cook with them. So they were like, oh, you should eat loads of this. And I was there like, what am I meant to do with them? So I started doing little stints in cookery school. So I first went to cookery school, I think in 2009. And then I went to cookery school, did a certificate in 2012 after the Olympics. So I loved it from like the two perspectives. From the perspective of I needed to perform well, but also from the perspective of I actually really enjoy cooking. I enjoy the process and I really enjoy eating. Like I love food. So yeah, it was interesting, but it's amazing to see so many people into it now, because that was so unusual, you know, in the middle of my career.
Would it have made so if you could go back and tap yourself on the shoulder as a 13, 14-year-old, what impact do you think it would have had in terms of performance earlier on in your career?
Do you know what? Probably, I think when you're thinking about teenagers, I think it's really important that they're enjoying it. Of course, the food's essential, but I think as a parent to a teenage, like I'm a parent now to 2 small kids, and I'm just like, I always want them to be enjoying whatever they're doing. Of course, I'm always considering like what they're eating, but I would not be in any way overly strict. I'm just trying to make sure they're getting some good foods into them. But I don't know. I think the fact that my parents didn't make a massive deal out of it, but they probably snuck healthy food into me in a way that I didn't even realize, I think was a really nice approach, and that I didn't overly worry about it. And I got to a point myself where I was like, this is actually negatively impacting how I perform. And if I can get better at this, maybe it's something else that will help me. But I don't think a 13-year-old that would have landed.
Maybe before Athens then, if you could go back and talk to yourself 18 months out from Athens, what would the impact be?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it would have made a difference to my experience of Athens. So I think I would have felt like I went there and was more prepared. Whereas I left the Athens Olympics feeling like I had turned up almost at an event without equipment. You know, like I felt like I turned up and I was so amateur in Athens. And that was one major component in it. Like I knew how to race, but all the other stuff that goes into it, and there's loads of other things I didn't know how to do. So I don't think result-wise it would have made a massive difference, because I wasn't good enough yet by Athens. You know, I was still on that kind of, you know, trajectory of getting better. But I think I would have walked out of it maybe feeling more like I belonged there, whereas I walked out of it very much questioning myself. But then I would argue that experience in Athens transformed who I became, because I felt like I was starting at such a low base. And I felt like if I could qualify for an Olympic Games at this ridiculously low base, what could I do if I actually started getting things right, or getting things 80 to 90%?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much I change. Like, I'm a big one for learning from situations and going, okay, it's not the outcome I wanted, but what happened that made me learn and made me get a bit better? And did that make me become a different athlete? And I think Athens transformed me as an athlete, and it was really difficult, but it transformed me.
Well, maybe this is a follow-on question from that then. Do you think that your knowledge base, specifically when it comes to this very small part of who an athlete is and their identity and their performance, but do you think that has been passed on to the generations that come after you? Because sometimes it feels like in Irish sports, we let people go off, be trailblazers, learn their lessons, and then if we ask them about it, the story gets told. But sometimes we don't ask them about it, and it's like there's these little silos of information that are sitting within, and I'm not talking just about athletics, because it happens in GAA all the time. A manager comes in, learns loads of stuff, and then disappears and takes with them all the intellectual property. And it happens in rugby, it happens in soccer. I'd say it does happen in individual sports even a bit more as well. So do you feel like we as an Irish sporting race have learned from the nutritional information that you and your generation acquired?
A really easy answer to that is no, to be honest. And I don't mean that just on the food context. I mean it more. And I was talking to David Gillick about this recently, because I've started doing a tiny bit of coaching, like really small. Someone came to me and asked me to help them. So I've been trying to help them. Myself and actually Marion Heffernan, Rob Heffernan's wife, have been together trying to do a bit of coaching. And I rang Dave Gillick because I was saying, you know, I was asking him, had anyone ever directly asked them for his help to coach them, you know? And he was saying no. And I was saying, it's funny because this would be one of the first times someone has asked me, and it's, however, 8 years since I retired. And I was saying, I feel, and I actually wrote a tweet about it during the Olympics, I feel there's all this knowledge built up during a career. And, you know, I would have looked at my whole system as like a high performance system, an individual high performance system. Nutrition was a massive part of it. Then obviously the training was a massive part of it. There was all these different components. And I could probably sit and present on that all day and I've training diaries everywhere and I've all this information on it. And Sean and Terry, my coaches, were a huge part of it, and different people who were in and out of my team at the time. And when I retired, it was literally like I wrote a column about retiring. I announced it and I turned my phone off for a day, and then I turned it back on, and that was it. I was done. I was gone. And there's been very little conversation since about my career or the learnings for it. And I'm not saying, like, I by far didn't have a perfect career, but, you know, at times it was really good, and it was at a level that's not easy to get to in world athletics. And I think, like, that knowledge base, and say even Paul Hessian, you know, the 1 and 200 meter record holder, he had an incredible, like, a few of us had really good careers at the same time, and we learned a lot off each other and we helped each other a lot. And Hessian actually lived near me recently because he's a doctor now, and he was doing 6 months in CUH. So I found him somewhere to live near me, and we would talk a lot about, like, different experiences and what we learned from different things and different approaches. But yet we've never really passed that on. But I don't think there's enough of a structure there to pass it on. So I really feel like when people retire, because even my coaches don't really coach now. So when I retired, Sean in particular didn't coach again, and I would doubt anyone has had a conversation with him about his learnings from my career. And we all would feel quite passionate about it. Like, and even during the Olympics, you know, myself, Rob and Sonia, we'd be talking about different things and different experiences. And, like, I was loving learning from Sonia because, as I say, because I'm doing a tiny bit of coaching now, I was going, okay, and, you know, she's coaching, so I was asking her, and Rob is coaching, so Rob was asking. So it's like this little kind of, we love to learn from each other. So I don't know. Did that answer your question very well?
100% it does. It's like we just don't have a structure in.
Yeah.
You hope that at some point the Sports Institute begins to get enough resources to be able to go back and ask people, you know, what are the things you've learned? Is it possible you could pass some of this on? Like, I remember watching a documentary about the boxers, and they were learning how to cook. It was the Paddy Barnes, Michael Conlon era, and it was one session and the cameras were there. So I'm sure the cameras were there because the session was happening, but at least there was a sense that this is something that them as young men were being trained to do. It's just that the first time they come into the system, it'd be great if there was somebody with, if they were to go back and say, I learned how to cook at 24 and it had a big impact on my ability to win a bronze medal in the Olympic Games. You're now 14. If you manage to crack this right now, you won't have to go through the problems that I went through. And when problems arise, you'll have that base of confidence that, you know, you eventually got. Like, I don't think anybody should ape your career path, but certainly they should learn the lessons that you learned later in your career as early as possible, so that whatever lessons they have to learn, they're doing it from a stronger base.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, it's funny because as simple as that, like, cooking is definitely one of them. Like, I didn't learn to cook until I was in my 20s, and it was very much like a solo mission where I went off and spent a long time trying to figure it out. And I get asked a lot about by parents, what should I feed my kids? My kids, and I'm like, okay, well, get a list of ingredients that are really good, and then actually just hand them a cookbook, like whoever's cookbook, and get them to get into the kitchen and learn it as a skill. Like, I do wish I'd gone to college and had it as a skill. I think it would have made a really big difference to me. Now, I did learn at the same time, but yeah, I did, and that's interesting. And I think there's, like, two sides of it. I think there's, like, the really practical stuff like that, like, what was your approach to food? What was your approach to nutrition? Like, what was your approach to the day-to-day? Like, simple things like, you know, I was saying, you know, I'm doing a tiny bit of coaching now, and like some of the things I would have done that was very practical and simple throughout my career, I think can at times maybe seem a bit surprising when I'm coaching. You know, it's like, really? And I'm going, and myself and Marion would be like, yeah, like, I don't even know how to give examples of it. You know, even something like the other day I was looking at the training plan, and I was like adding up all the amount of, because we're sprinters, so it's different to endurance. So I was adding up kind of the amount of steps, like the amount of meters in the session for the week, just in terms of load, because just monitoring injuries. And even that was something that I was like, okay, well, what would your like your meter load have been in other years when you got injured and stuff? And, you know, like monitoring, looking, writing things down. There's so many things that are so practical, but it took me years to learn them. And, like, my career was about 14 years long. It's not like I rocked into it at 20 and I was great. I wasn't at all. I was so far from great. I was so raw. I didn't have a clue. I was just, I think probably the best way to describe it was quite spirited and had an excessive, maybe at times deluded belief that I could do something. But you know, by the time I left 14 years later, I think there was a lot of things I had acquired a lot of knowledge on that were really, really helpful. But yeah, I don't know, like, it's funny, even a simple one, like when I was starting to do a tiny bit of coaching, I was looking for training plans for sprinters. And like, even something simple as like, imagine having like a centralized database where every athlete we've ever had, like all our national records are pretty incredible on a European and global scale. They'd all do pretty well. That's one of the things I did during the Olympics. I looked at all our national records and how they would have done at the current Olympic Games. They would have done pretty well if you could get all our athletes running them again. So then I'm going, well, you have all these athletes who ran all these times and, you know, field events, you have people who did jumps, throws, whatever. Imagine if all of their coaches and all those athletes had taken their training diaries and uploaded them to a database when they finished. And then the generation now could look into it going, oh, that's interesting. That's a session they used for speed during racing. That session they did, oh, that's interesting. The athlete uploaded something about like, you know, their diet or what they were doing. That's interesting that was their approach or things like that. I was like, imagine if we found a way to capture that data. I don't think that would be that difficult.
No,
but I underestimate a lot of things.
Like okay, so Facebook are obviously evil, but a Facebook page would be the easiest way to do that. You could actually, obviously, with a tiny bit of money and investment, get some proper system. I don't know if you know that one of the pieces of memorabilia we have here, Cleta Foley gave us this. It's the 100 metres final from 2009 in Berlin. It's the official results sheet that she kept and had framed. And first, it's Brigitte Foster-Heilton. It's Lopez Schlepp second. It's Ennis London third, and it's you in fourth. This is from 2009. This is a little bit of the records that we have in our studio here, and it's special to us. But do you have any of that kind of stuff? Is that any part of your life now anymore?
That's a really good one, by the way, you have, because that's my favourite race in my career.
Right.
Is that one. Yeah, so it's a good one. I have one picture hanging in the house downstairs, and it's one that Sheahan got for me, my coach, after I won World Indoors. And I think that's probably a pretty good one to have. But there's just one hanging there. Like I've loads of stuff, and I don't, you know, most of it's in boxes. I don't have much of it around the house, and we actually have more because obviously, you know, my husband went to the Olympics for sailing. We've more kind of boaty pictures because I think they look prettier because of the ocean. So, but not because he's sailing in them. Hopefully he's not listening to this. But I just like, oh, that's very nice. But yeah, I must actually go through my stuff at some stage. But I'm actually like, I'm not a hugely sentimental person, so like I don't look at stuff like that, and I think about it more in terms of like the fact that you have that, like I love that because I'm like, that was, in my opinion, the best race of my career, even though it wasn't the quickest race of my career. But I should probably put that somewhere. But actually, I framed that photo finish for Sean and Terry after that race, and I think that's probably the only thing they have of my career as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's a funny one. I think people are different. Like you walk into some people's houses and there's like singlets and there's stuff everywhere. My house is definitely not like that.
It's interesting.
Is that a good or bad thing?
I think it's really interesting. And just to bring this all back, the point about learning how to cook.
Yes.
One of the first things that anybody can actually learn to cook with is eggs. If like burn the eggs for the first few weeks, but by the end of those few weeks, you're going to be able to feed yourself 5 times a week, really easily, and it's a different meal every night. Like it is actually the easiest way to get into cooking.
Oh, like eggs are, and I swear, I'm not just saying this, I think eggs are the perfect food because it's like there's protein in there and there's amino acids, and you have to make sure you check for the quality mark, the Board B a quality mark. We're really fortunate that we live in a country, and I can tell you this from traveling the world, that food quality is really a big deal in Ireland. So I think make sure you check for the quality mark, but very versatile, use them in loads of ways. And yeah, cooking's one of those things, just like start to practice and see how you go. And what's the worst that happens? You burn an egg. It's probably unlikely. Eggs are kind of hard to burn. If anything, you're just going to make your boiled egg hard, and that's still pretty nice. So you'll be fine.
Stick a bit of mayonnaise on it. That's what I would say. Derval, great to have you with us, and hopefully we've started a conversation about learning from previous generations and the passing on, because it definitely feels like everybody is on the same curve here. If we just learn to help each other, then everybody progresses.
Yeah, and no one has, you know, I think something that's interesting, like I don't have all the answers. I couldn't go and tell an athlete how to do everything because everyone's on their own path, but I think there's definitely learnings from what I would have done, from Sonia, from Rob, you know, and I think we need to capture more of that and have more of that like knowledge sharing, because I think that would only help the current set of athletes. It's nice to know that people were there and did it to a certain extent, and that if you're trying to do it, that you might pick up a couple of things. And even like I picked up so much stuff from Sonia, and she did a completely different event to me. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one. So we'll see how that progresses.
Derval, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Always great to talk to you. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
That's Derval O'Rourke there, and as she said, get some eggs. Check the quality mark on them. 9:39 this morning, OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Kenny Cunningham is in studio tomorrow as we build up to Ireland against Azerbaijan. Alan Quinn will join us. We'll have more on Special Congress, and the crappy quiz returns from hiatus.
Featuring Kenny C.
Oh, Kenny Cunningham's
Hey Cunningham.
Wow, that's going to be amazing. Right now, rugby, Rory O'Connor and Niamh Briggs.
You're very welcome along to Wednesday Night Rugby. Happy to say Niamh Briggs, Grand Slam winner, is with us. Hey, Niamh.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. And Rory O'Connor from the Irish Independent. Come on in. Hello, Rory.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Niamh.
It has
Hi,
been a day, Rory, where Callum Robinson has grabbed the headlines. So, not surprisingly, somebody, it may well have been you, I'm not even too sure. I just saw the headline. Somebody was onto the IRFU to check what the current vaccination rate is across our professional team structures, and they were quite forthcoming with the percentage.
Yeah, and not surprisingly, given the number, it was, I put the request into the IRFU earlier today. Munster were at, Graham Rowntree was asked about it at the Munster press conference and didn't want to go into it. So I asked the question, and the rate is 99.2% of all staff, players and coaches have been vaccinated at this point. Some, I think, have only had one dose, but are on their way to having their second. So it's well above, I think, the national average. It's well above what we're hearing from other sports. And I suppose it puts the IRFU and Irish Rugby in a pretty strong position when it comes to the season ahead and trying to navigate through potentially tricky waters down the line, that they can do so with a bit of confidence that they'll be able to fulfil their end of the bargain when it comes to fixtures.
Because rugby increasingly can be more on the withholding end of the spectrum when it comes to medical information than forthcoming. But I suppose here they're more than happy to come out front and centre today of all days and say, don't come near us, we're good.
Yeah, in fairness to them, we did ask rather than them giving us the information to make anyone else look bad. But yeah, I think they were pretty happy to get that out there. I think they were even surprised themselves by how high the figure was when they compiled it and put all the 4 provinces together. It just, as I say, there's not a huge amount to say about it because it is so strong. Because I think it's a talking point when the numbers are down, and I'm sure there's a socio-economic or kind of a sociological study that could be done on why the uptake has been so high above rugby players. Haven't thought about it that much myself, but there's definitely, it's an incredibly good number. It's a very positive news story for the RFU to be able to tell, and I suppose it reflects very well on the players themselves who've taken, and the coaches and the staff behind the scenes who've taken it up. It's a good example for everyone, I think.
Yeah. The other story, which again there may not be all that much to say about it, but has made some back pages and caught the eye, no pun intended here, is about a change that will be coming to rugby, it seems. In particular, red and green kit clashes will be a thing of the past in international matches to help sufferers of colour blindness. So they want to get this done for the 2027 World Cup at the latest. Turns out Bill Beaumont, the World Rugby chairman, suffers from colour blindness, so he was out very much to the fore talking about this, and he said, from our perspective, if you're potentially limiting 8% of your male audience, that's a huge number of people who are suddenly switching off a game, is what he said. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures. I saw a few newspapers showing what a Wales-Ireland match looks like to somebody who's colourblind, and effectively, look, everybody is, they all have the white shorts, but then it's probably just 30 players running around in brown jerseys and brown socks is how it looks to someone with colour blindness. So that's end of an era for the rest of us in terms of the green and the red.
Yeah, absolutely it is. But I suppose if it's an accessibility issue, we should make the game as accessible as possible for the people who can't experience it in the way that we can. And it seems like a pretty simple fix. I'm sure the unions will welcome the chance to show off their shiny second jerseys. Ireland don't often get to do that, only when they play South Africa. So I'm sure they'll be happy with that side of things. Not to suggest there's a cynical end to it, but at the end of an era. But it's a small price to pay, I suppose, if you are enhancing the viewing experience for a small, for a significant proportion of people who are not able to enjoy it.
Well, 8%. I mean, it's amazing. Actually, it's endured this long. Niamh, colour blindness, are you able to watch Ireland-Wales fine?
Yeah, I am. I actually thought it was a mad stat today. I think I read that was 1 in 12 males suffer from colour blindness, which is pretty big when you put it into the context of, probably a watching and playing population. So, look, I agree with Rory. I think if you're making the game more accessible all round, then, why not?
So to the weekend's rugby that was, and we'll have a look ahead to what's coming up. Niamh, in broad terms, what have you made of the opening to the United Rugby Championship?
Yeah, look, I think it's exciting. I think the South African element, albeit we haven't seen, close score lines or big kind of, I think it's been tough for them given that they're away from home and without their top players. But in saying that, I think they've definitely provided an idea of where the tournament is going to be once everybody's back in shape. And I think from that element, you've got to be excited. I think if you're from an Irish province, you've got to be happy with how they've all started. And yeah, look, I think it's been a good few weeks, to be fair.
Rory, I think the TV coverage has probably helped it as well. I mean, and this is a terrible thing to say when it's, TG Cara is our national language, but certainly on RTE, given the full treatment and analysis you can get your teeth into and watch and primetime kickoff times, I think that probably hasn't done this competition any harm at all. I know there are still games on TG Cara and no problems with that whatsoever, but just as a floating voter, sometimes when you're not able to follow what's going on necessarily, that didn't help the competition, I felt at times.
I think it's a fair point. I think what was more damaging was, and I worked with Air a little bit, and I thought Air did a really good job on it, but Air just wasn't accessible to people. Air Sports, there was whole tranches of the population who just couldn't even pay for it if they wanted to. It was quite expensive if you were a Sky customer to get Air. If you were a Virgin Media customer, you couldn't get it because of a dispute, and it just took the whole thing behind a closed door. So TG Cara at least was accessible to people. You could, if you had a problem with the Irish or not, you still could watch the game. Whereas with the deal that was there before RTE, a lot of people couldn't even watch it. But I do think having it on free to air, the resources RTE have put behind it in terms of the number of people that have covered it at the games, they're giving it the big game treatment, and I think it's benefiting from that. It just needs the games to kind of back that up. I think Munster Stormers was a really good game on Saturday night. Leinster Dragons is less so on a Sunday kind of graveyard slot on a Sunday lunchtime, but that's the competition we're in. RTE can only do what they're deal with what they're handed with, and I think I think it's definitely giving a greater exposure to a tournament that definitely didn't have it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, like for instance, I was one of the Virgin customers. I couldn't get Air. It was never quite big enough reason to go to the hassle of switching over and trying to do all that rigmarole. So I was just working off TG Cara in the main. What about you, Niamh? Have you found maybe the new broadcasting arrangements have helped a little bit, or no great difference on that front to you?
Yeah, no, look, I had Air, but to be fair, I think the production between RTE and TG Cara has been really good. I think, for example, the difference in terms of being able to go to Bernard Jackman or Murray Kinsella on sideline and talk about analysis, I think, for a rugby nerd, it's really good. It buys you in, and obviously then the punditry, I suppose, is of a really good caliber as well. So people are tuning in. But I agree with Rory. I think, the quality of game probably helps as well. And there was definitely 3 good quality games this weekend from an Irish perspective.
Yeah. So Rory mentioned Munster as maybe the more interesting one. Game of 2 halves in the extreme, Niamh. What was your sense of how Munster will feel about that afterwards? Because Eoin van Graan was absolutely playing up the positives and talking about how they adapted, and he's thrilled they adapted when he was asked about the fact they were very much forward-oriented tries. He was swatting that away, saying, no, we're thrilled with the way that we took the Stormers' challenge and reacted.
Yeah, and I kind of have to agree with him. I was at the game and I couldn't get over how physically big the Stormers were. Like, their wingers were as big as our back row. And I think it took a while for Munster to get a handle on that, to get a handle on the pace. They were probably one of the only South African teams that looked to play to an edge, and they got change out of it. I think big turning point for me was O'Mahony's save under the posts, because You know, you go in at half time 14-7 down as opposed to, or 15-7 down as opposed to 19 or 21 or whatever it would have been. You know, it's a different conversation, you know, and I think they came out in the second half, really haven't gotten to grips with that physicality. I also thought the Stormers ran out a bit of steam. I think when Munster scored that try just before half time, you could visibly see them on their hands and knees, some of them behind the posts. They were blowing really hard. And I think, you know, from a Munster kind of psychological point of view, you walk in at half time and think, okay, we didn't have the ball for probably 25, 28 minutes of that half, and they've played all the rugby, and physically they look under pressure, and we're only one score behind. And I think that just generally transforms that halftime talk. But they played some good rugby for sure. Definitely still areas that they've got to tidy up, I think. And I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with the opening 2 tries from the Stormers, albeit, you know, they were coming. But I think that there were defensive mistakes on the inside as opposed to brilliant play by the Stormers. But look, I think they'll be really happy with a bonus point win at the end of that.
What about you, Rory, and the point of how they managed to get those bonus point tries being used against them a touch?
I think they have to go that way if that's the way to win the game. And if the Stormers are offering that way into a win, you got to take it. And the way to beat the Stormers on Saturday was to go through them, and Munster did that brilliantly and got the reward for it. If they do that every week over the course of the season, I think it won't be good enough to beat the best teams come the business end of the season. And that's where Munster have fallen down. Like Leinster played that game against them in the RDS in the Pro 14 final last season and wiped them off the floor, wiped the floor with them. And I think it's all about having some variation. It does happen quite frequently that you know, Munster may win the game at Thomond Park, but it's the visiting team who play the majority of the rugby. Towards the end of last season, Cardiff played unbelievable rugby, sparkling rugby at Thomond Park, and ended up on the losing side. Connacht beat them by playing really good rugby. And Munster almost went kind of, because it had worked for them earlier in the season, they almost kept going back to that direct style over the course of the year, which, you know, I think is a mistake. Just because it worked against the Stormers last weekend, I don't think should be their game plan going into the Scarlets this weekend. I think they have to keep developing the other sides of that game, because when they come up against, say, a Toulon or Toulouse or a La Rochelle or Leinster down the line, it won't be enough to get them through. But if you're down by that much, with, you know, coming up to half time, and it's the only way to go win a game, you know, there's no shame in going and winning it that way. It just, you have to have the other strings to your bow.
Yeah, because I suppose, Niamh, the concern would be, even with a beefed up pack and the likes of Sneeman in and fit, Munster can't expect to be able to outpower the bigger European teams. I mean, maybe they're in a position now to really match them and to go to, you know, we saw what La Rochelle did to Leinster, for instance, last year, to go to those kind of places and maybe hold their own, but they certainly won't dominate. So therefore, I think we're all looking to see a bit more craft and a bit more creativity, and we've been saying that for some time about Munster in the bigger games, I think. So that's probably where I'm coming from when I'm asking these questions about, is it somewhat underwhelming to see them win in a way that they probably can't replicate in the latter stages of a European Cup or against a Leinster?
Look, I'm not sure about that. I think when you have a fully stacked team and the likes of Denande and Chris Farrell are back in, then that makes a different kind of a centre partnership that offers probably something different than what was there the other day. I think at the moment,
but will that even with those guys back, is that big enough to dominate Leinster? Like, there was absolutely no sign of that, for instance, in the final last year. It was a lack of craft which cost them in that game, for instance. That's where I'm coming from on that point.
Yeah, no, and I understand where you're coming from. I just think, I just feel like there's something different this year. We see them play to the edges a little bit more than we've probably possibly done before. You know, they're actually, you know, I think Sibo's second try in round one, I think, kind of shows that they're looking to probably move the ball a little more. They're looking to play even in around that tight. You know, they're not really running into bodies anymore. They're more running into spaces around the bodies, which, you know, I was critical of last year. I felt like that they didn't offer enough in terms of the ball carry. So I think a lot of things like that come with, there's like loads of little different metrics, you know, their ability to carry in and around soft shoulders, their clear out, you know, you get quicker ball on the back of that. And at times the other day, you know, they didn't have that in the first half. And they seem to have a lot of miscommunication, for example, between Coombs and Casey a couple of times, but they've managed to work around it, and I think that's a huge positive. And look, I'm not sure it's enough to beat, right now, it's enough to beat, the bigger teams, but I think that you've got to work your way into it. And I think that there was definitely moments the other day when you saw small little plus passes that we wouldn't have seen before. We looked to, get to the edges a little bit more than we would have beforehand with handling as opposed to with our boot. And I think that that's got to be the way for Munster. I don't think that they're going to physically beat anybody up front at times, but they have handling ability, like that back row, their second row partnership, like the Simon, but even just Thomas Ahern, these kind of guys, they can all play rugby and they all have really good handling skills. And I think if you look to nourish and evolve those type of players to be able to, play another phase, be able to keep the ball alive, to be able to anticipate an offload, well then for me that's a big evolution for Munster from last season, and I think it can only be a positive thing.
Okay, fair enough, yeah, because I was watching the first half and I definitely would subscribe to the view that the Stormers were just wiped, tired, gassed somewhere in the second half, But in the first half, when they were full of energy and going strong against Munster, we maybe saw them, Rory, get to the touchline, as Niamh's talking about there, with their handling maybe a bit. Once you could really count, and I think it led actually to the Peter O'Mahony, the try cancelled. He was the third man latching. And you kind of just, for a lot of that game, felt like it was just Craig Casey kicking the ball away for Munster for too much of that game. And again, I'm being deliberately harsh here almost to kind of test where you guys are at, but my sense watching it was, well, there might be little increments, but it's certainly nothing drastic here.
No, and it's, year 3 of the Stephen Larkham project, and there's this eternal struggle that looks like from behind the scenes between the South African influence and the Australian influence and the English influence of Graham Rowntree. And the second half looked more like the kind of English South African model as opposed to the kind of the highly kind of structured attacking Stephen Larkham game. And it's that kind of identity of the coaching ticket that you're kind of trying to tease out all the time. It's fascinating to watch. We hear that Stephen Larkham has a much greater influence this year. Graham Rowntree, there's quotes in tomorrow's papers about how good a job Larkham is doing there. But there is, and I think there's an arch conservatism to the way that Johan van Graan wants to play. He is from that South African school. We've seen at international level what South Africa want to do. There's a lot of South African players in there. Not a lot, but there's a good contingent of South African players in there. They had Rassie Erasmus and Jock Nienaber as their coaches beforehand. There's just a struggle there all the time, I think, between the two. And, having different ways to play is a real strength when it works. And there's nothing wrong with going tight when that's the way to go, as I said earlier. There are, as Niamh pointed out, different strands to the game. And it's really early in the season. It's only 2 games in. I think after Sunday, when they go to Scarlets away, we'll know a bit more about where they stand, because that's a tough fixture. They, having 2 South African teams first up, it's a bit of an unknown, but they're 2 teams that they should be beating, and they've beaten them. There's bigger tests to come for this Munster team, and bigger tests of the way they want to play as well.
Yeah, no, that's totally all fair as well. Scarlets away on Sunday, they have Connacht at home in week 4, and then Ospreys away week 5, and then they'll take the international break. So that's a decent sample size, those 5 weeks. Niamh, I'm sure your eye was it's great you're at the game, you can get such a feel for things there. I'm sure your eye was drifting towards Joey Carbery quite a bit and trying to get a sense of what he was trying to do and where he was in his return, I guess, which is ongoing. He's been, I wouldn't say criticised in the main, but listening to various things, it has certainly been noted that with the pre-season under his belt and everything else, he certainly hasn't pitched up in a way that looks like he's ready to grab the jersey from Johnny Sexton in the absolute short term, i.e. November, with his form.
Yeah, no, and I think it was another kind of a mismatch game the other day. I think watching him live, he can obviously, he just glides over the ground, and he looks like he's not even running quickly. And then, he's just, he has moments of magic. For me, though, when you look at playing 10 and bossing it, I think the jury's still out on it. I think.
And when you say bossing it, Niamh, I think we all have a feel for that and how it looks. But for you, for instance, give us some examples of, terrible to compare him to a Sexton or an O'Gara, but when they needed to boss something, like in that game when things weren't going well, what wasn't he doing that they might have done?
Yeah, look, I just felt at times Munster were going across the pitch when they managed to hold on to the ball for a few phases. They were quite lateral, and he's got to be the one to move that that pack around or his outside backs so that they're coming onto the ball pace, they're coming on square. And I think when he drifts with the ball, I'm not sure what's outside him understands what he's going to do, maybe, or that, you know, that they can't straighten it for him. Look, I've been saying it for a while now. I think 15 is probably his best position because his ability to be able to see, his ability to be able to be a second playmaker when there's no pressure on, but also to, you know, he's such a good broken field runner. I don't know, do we get the best out of him at 10? Now, it's probably not a very popular decision to say or a very popular opinion to have, but I just think at times the other day, it was almost like Joey/Munster were kind of running out of options of what they were doing or where they were going. And you don't often see that, I think, when Sexton or O'Gara, and I don't like comparing because they're all incredibly different players, but to be that assertive and to be in that 10 role, you've got to be able to understand that when you're on the front foot, you know, passing or kicking, you've got to be able to choose or pick the right option. And I felt at times when we couldn't get gain line, especially in that first half, we just kind of seemed to run up a few blind alleys. And there was definitely space. You're looking at, you know, a pot of carry outside of Craig Casey. And if you look to go out the back of that and outside, you know, it's almost like a double, I don't know what the ordinary supporter would call it, but you know, a spot play where they go, you know, wide out the back of hard runners.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that there was space to do that and he had time to do it. And we just didn't seem to maybe see it. I don't know.
And have you? It's a really interesting point. Have you seen him see it in previous games, or has this always been a slight concern of yours?
No, and you see, I don't know because I don't know what Munster are doing. I don't know how they're trained. I don't know how they want to play in terms of it's not something that they look to do. I think, you know, you look at, say, if you compare it to, say, someone like a Finn Russell type player, and Joey's quite similar because he's quite a maverick on the ball and he's got exceptional skills. But he runs so flat to the line and he's able to pull passes back because there's a two-line tack. Whereas I don't think Munster really have that. And I think that's maybe where he falls off. And I think he did so well when he was at Leinster because they did have that, if that makes sense. So they did have that two-line attack. And I think if you're going to play Joey in a 10, then you've got to give him the freedom to express himself. And so I don't know whether it's a lack of confidence from himself coming back from an injury or a game plan for Munster that they don't want to, or whether it's just a balance in between that. But like, I'd love to see a Jack Crowley, Ben Healy type of a 10 with Joey a fullback and just to see whether that combination works. I think his best performances for Ireland have been at 15. And,
well, I was just going to ask, are Ireland more inclined to play with a shape that might suit Carbery at 10 more so than Munster?
Yeah, maybe. I think, look, I think Ireland's attack has definitely evolved over the last season. You know, we've been quite critical about it up until maybe the last, well, you have too, to be fair.
I just asked the questions.
For the last while, and I do think that it got better as the Six Nations went on into the summer tour. So, look, we've got to see it. And you're also looking at a pack too that are, you know, you've got to try and, for players like Joey to be on that front foot, you've got to be winning the gain line and you've got to be coming onto the ball quick and you've got to set tempo.
Yeah.
I think when Munster at times go backwards, you know, or don't make that, the ball is so down, it doesn't suit him.
No, fair enough. The worrying thing there from an Irish point of view, I suppose, Rory, is that Ireland certainly need Joey Carbery to work out at 10, looking at their options at the moment in the medium term.
Absolutely. I don't think it's unfair to compare him to Ronan O'Gara or Johnny Sexton because that's how he's comparing himself. I mean, Joey Carbery's gone on record as saying he wants to be the best player in the world, and this is before of his injury. He's obviously still on a bit of a comeback trail, but he's had a full pre-season now. I did speak to him in March or April after his kind of initial comeback from the injury, and he said it does take him a couple of games to get up and running, which I think is fair enough for any player. At the same time, if you compare him to the kind of, say, that Gloucester performance away from home in the European Cup, he's nowhere near the level that he got to that time, that day. And I think what Niamh raises with the 15 thing is a very legitimate question. But Leinster certainly thought his best position was 15. That's why they wanted to keep Ross Byrne and Joey Carbery on board as almost, you know, to play together in the post Johnny Sexton era. Right now, Johnny Sexton on form is still the number 1, number 10. The question Andy Farrell must be asking himself in his head is how long can he persist with Johnny Sexton as his number 1 out half? if he's going to be 38 at the next World Cup? Can he hope for a Tom Brady like maintenance of standards, or does he have to start just going with a younger player to try and at least future-proof the team, so that if Johnny doesn't make it, he has someone else there with enough minutes under his belt? It's been something we've probably talked about every week in this call, for a long time, but it's still the burning issue for the Irish rugby team. Joey Carberry is the strongest of the alternative options, but right now he's not playing at his best, and that must be a bit of a concern for Andy Farrell.
Yeah, well,
I just think also too.
Sorry, Niamh.
He missed quite a few tackles as well week 1, and he missed a couple of last week as well. And I think, they spoke about Ronan O'Gara's defence and where teams used to basically line him up and be able to run over him. And, to be fair to him, he never shirked away from it. And I think that's an element too that, if you're Andy Farrell, I think even if you're Johan van Graan, you've got to be a little bit concerned about are you inviting teams down that channel because your defensive qualities as 10 isn't as strong?
Yeah, fair point. Well, we'll see how the next couple of weeks go. Rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone here, not the ball sponsors of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. We're talking with Niamh Briggs and Rory O'Connor. Connacht we should absolutely mention. So TG Carr got a great interview, in fairness, with Jake White pre-game, where I think Jake White's going to be fun. The United Rugby Championship needs some needle, needs some selling points, needs some characters, and Jake White more than played the pantomime villain. So I don't know to what extent this had any effect on the match itself, because it's not like these comments were bubbling away all week. This is literally the pre-game coach interview on TG Carr. Jake White, what do you know about Connacht?
A lot of Leinster players who come down from Leinster. Obviously, the guys who didn't get contracts up there come down. Yeah, it's very similar to a couple of franchises we have in South Africa. When they don't get contracted by the big unions, they go down to the small provinces, and then obviously try and find a way in which they can get noticed by the bigger provinces. So yeah, we're used to playing that sort of opposition, and I think again it'll be nothing different. They'll be wanting to front up, especially after last week they lost the game.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.